So, reminder, if you have a cell phone, to go ahead and mute it or turn it off. It's totally up to you. And that brings us to our Pledge of Allegiance, which is going to be offered by Vice Mayor Richard Ortega, following the invocation, which is going to be by Councilman Lopez. Would you stand and remain standing for both, please?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Heavenly Father, God, Savior, Healer, by all the many names that our valley calls you by, Father, we come before you. It's a new year, Father, and I ask you to be with us in our valley and all our citizens, that everybody will have a great year and be safe. I pray that we meet the challenges we got forward this year, that the staff comes forward like they always do, and that we come together in many of our decisions that influence us greatly. And I say this in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Thank you, Councilman. Appreciate that. That's also going to bring us to citizen comments on agenda items. Citizen comments on non-agenda items, Tammy? No? That's going to get us to the selection of the Vice Mayor.
Mayor, I'd like to nominate myself for Vice Mayor.
Okay.
Mayor,
Go
wait till
ahead.
you finish writing. I would like to remain and stay with the current Vice Mayor, Richard Ortega. I'd like to nominate him.
Okay. Anybody else? Okay, so for that, since, I'm going to go ahead and close it. I have two nominations. We're going to go ahead and vote for Councilman Mike Andazola first. And we'll do that by a hand vote. So all those in favor of Councilman Mike Andazola for Vice Mayor, please raise your hand. Okay, we got three. And now for Vice Mayor Richard Ortega, all those in favor, go ahead and raise your hand. Any opposed? Okay. Congratulations, Richard Ortega. You are the Vice Mayor again for the next 2 years. Appreciate that.
Thank you.
All right, that brings us to selection of officers for the liaison for the community boards and committees. Boys and girls is Councilman Andazola. You want to remain there?
You know what, Mayor, if I may ask?
Go ahead.
I would like to move. And what is the League of Arizona Cities and Towns Resolution Committee? What is?
The resolution committee,
Yeah,
I
does anybody
believe.
know what that entails?
Go ahead.
Every year, the league puts together something called a municipal policy statement. So basically, municipalities can bring forward ideas for changes to legislation, and the form they take in the committee is a resolution. And then everybody in the committee will vote on those resolutions, and in those resolutions, they'll carry forward certain ones to try to make them bills that they bring to the legislature. So it's a way for communities to basically bring ideas forward that can then end up on the docket at the legislature as a bill.
Mayor, I'd like to move to that committee then.
I have no problem with that.
Mayor,
Go ahead.
with that position, on page 94, we're going to be also talking about who we have on a committee that's going to watch some of the bills that our new legislature brings to the floor and drops. And we were going to have somebody watch on that. It almost seems hand in hand that goes together with this building resolutions. I don't know if it does, or that same person, or
I know
could be
that,
merged together or not.
I believe that the city has been, has an individual that watches that closely, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, John, but I believe it's Mr. Hoschel.
That's correct. And also, the league does intergov meetings. They also do clerk meetings, finance meetings. So what I'm trying to do this year in our staff meetings is have those individuals that sit in on those, bring any new pieces of legislation that come to the fore. Also, public safety does a lot as well. So I'm gonna try and have those flow through the staff meeting more and try to get some, as part of my reports to council, at any new bills that may be impactful on localities. So hopefully we'll be bringing those through staff and then bringing them on to the council.
Does that answer your question, Councilman?
Somewhat, but yeah, we don't get much notice on where bills sit, when they're dropped, where they are in committee and stuff. And I'm getting a little ahead, but later on on page 94, you'll see how they could possibly merge.
Okay, and I do believe that staff will get us those as fast as they come. I know that I receive updated information, and you know, if I don't pass that on, I apologize, but sometimes they just ask for a signature, and they wrote a letter, and I sign it, and we go on. So, you know, so I mean, if you want to throw stones, go ahead and start throwing them this way. But I got a pretty big shield, so. All right. Is that all right?
Well, yeah, as soon as I figure out what you said, but that'll come later.
Okay. Bring us so the Boys and Girls Club is open. It's a really good organization. Somebody needs to jump on that.
I'll take that.
You take that? Okay, thank you, Councilman. That brings us to Mount Graham Safe House.
I would like to stay on there.
Okay, sounds great. That brings us to the Pride of Safford.
I've been asked to stay there, so I'll stay there.
Okay. That brings us to the Seago Board, Vice Mayor.
I'll stay there.
Sounds good. Downtown Association is empty.
I'd be willing to take that if you'd like me to, or
Steve, I think you'd do a really terrific job with that. Thank you, Councilman. Gila Watershed Partnership. You are also on that board.
I enjoy that.
Perfect. That brings us to the Arizona Community Foundation for the Gila Valley. That is Councilman Hemphill.
I'd like to stay.
And how about the Chamber?
Same.
Perfect. The retirement, public safety retirement, that is myself, and I'll stay on that, and the League of Cities and Towns Executive Committee also. So if everybody's okay with that, unless somebody has a heartburn, they're more than welcome to have it.
Like, that's Mr. Arbizo was trying to make an attempt on one, but she didn't look
No.
over this
Oh,
way.
which
but
one did you
That's
want?
fine.
I'm sorry.
It's fine.
He's good? All right.
I was gonna, on the downtown association, that's fine.
That's fine if you want it. If
You guys,
want it.
you guys call it. I'm sorry, I didn't.
Yeah,
just-
yeah.
Yeah,
I just,
I don't want no
So,
stone.
I'll try it,
okay, go ahead.
Okay, Downtown Association is going to be,
yes.
okay.
I didn't mean to jump in there, but I know.
Well, thanks
you
for,
do that
thank,
way,
it's,
so
it's,
I
They
appreciate
don't
it.
look down here very often.
all right, before we get into a presentation, I am going to go ahead and kind of give you guys a little bit of my visions and where I want to see us going. Each new year is a time of us to renewal on possibility to overcome challenges and to exceed in excellence. I'm excited about what the council has accomplished in 2022 and look forward to face the challenges of 2023 as we continue moving forward. We have only just begun. Staff, I want to be respectful and listen carefully to the needs you are facing in helping make Safford the best place to live, work. I'm not going to say visit because we play here, so I say play, okay? So, and also council, let's continue to respect each other and work well together to govern this great city. I hold each one of you personally in high esteem and thank each and every one of you for your servant heart. I appreciate each and every single one of you. That's going to go ahead and bring us to item 9.1, which is the presentation for the Arizona Community Action Program, CCAP. I believe that we've narrowed this down from a really long speech to a pretty quick one, correct?
Yes, sir, we have.
Okay, thank you. And the reason for that is our time restraint
Right.
and knowing a little bit about the program and what you're seeking, and knowing that we are definitely behind you and we'll do anything we can to assist you. So go ahead.
Thank you. Happy New Year, Mr. Mayor and all council members. My name's Yvette Ramirez. I'm the Executive Director of Southeastern Arizona Community Action Program. We're the agency here in Graham County that helps low-income families with rent, utilities, weatherization, but our big program is the utility program. And in the packet, you'll see where we provided utility assistance for the last 35 years. And something drastic happened in March of 2022 where the state DES, Department of Economic Security, came in and said, we're going to take it away from you guys and we are now going to determine eligibility. Well, they didn't ask us, they didn't ask any of the community action agencies anywhere in the state for input, suggestions of how they should do this. Well, we have encountered since October when it took effect some very, very serious issues and how it's affecting the community, specifically the elderly in our community. The packet kind of explains how we provided services, how the services are being provided now, and in the packet there's also an application. And the reason that we included the application is because we need you guys to see how difficult it would be for a senior citizen to complete that application on a portal on a computer, and then to have to upload all that documentation and send it in to see if they qualify for assistance. Seniors are the most frugal individuals that we have met, that when they apply for utility assistance, they're very, very careful about saving. You know, they don't turn their heaters on, they don't turn their ACs on, because they want to make sure that they have enough money to last them through the year. They don't know now, the way the process is, how much they're qualifying for. The state is making those decisions. They're not good decisions. We've had several issues where seniors have been, we feel, hurt. One of the situations there was one lady who did not get the assistance in time. She had a heart attack. She actually ended up in the hospital. We had a senior here in Safford who contacted us last week. She applied, she got approved, and she applied for propane. Well, when you apply for propane, they send the money directly to your bank account. Well, they did. Well, she was overdrawn on her bank account. So the money actually didn't go for her to get propane. It brought up her bank account current. So she called us wanting to know, okay, so, you know, how am I going to do it for my propane? So we've tried with the Department of Economic Security to have meetings. We're working with our state association. They've put roadblocks. We just can't get to them. So the decision CCAP made was to go to all the Board of Supervisors in our 4 counties, all the city councils, and ask for your support. Not financial, but your support in writing letters, maybe some contacts in saying, please give the community action back the voucher dollars. They're still giving us the administrative dollars to run the program. That's not the problem. It's the voucher dollars that are issued for us to help the families. It's getting more and more serious, and we need your help. Any questions?
Anybody have any questions? Go ahead.
I hadn't heard of this news happening. I'm on the area of aging in this southeastern Arizona corner, and I'm on a board that's governed by the vice mayor in Siegel. I hadn't heard that these vouchers had been dropped out and come back, and I'm gonna have to reach out to the people I'm associated with, find out what's happened, and where I don't know about the rest of the council, where I could help.
And this just started 3 months ago in October, and we've really been struggling trying to keep up with everything that's going on. But we did notify the state that we were starting the beginning of the year. We were gonna, hit the ground running the old way and say, we need your help. So I have contacted Mr. Heiss at Seago. I'm waiting for his response so that I can present to his board also.
And I think there's about 3 agencies trying to get the monies. So something's not going somewhere, because some monies came down federally to the state and was divvied out, and we do have one-time monies in there somewhere, but where it's at, I don't know, but I'm definitely going to try to find out.
Okay.
Yvette, I am the president of SECA, so I'm gonna follow up with this and see what we can
Please.
do from our end, and whatever you need, contact me.
Okay.
I don't know, we'll just take it from there, but, this is an issue that needs to be taken care of, because we have a lot of elderly in this
Yes.
community that I represent that are low income.
Yes.
And we need to take care of these people. I'm telling everybody here at this diocese right now, these people are the people of our citizens here in this community, and they need to be represented well and not be overcharged or anything like that.
And we know that we're headed in that direction. I mean, technology is technology, and yes, eventually everybody's gonna have to apply through the portal. But the way they did it, it was done incorrectly. There wasn't enough time for the seniors to be told this is how it's gonna be, and for us to help them apply. And it's a disgrace, it really is. But the infinite wisdom of the state, they just decided that they could do a better job.
Go ahead.
I'll bring this up at the next Siegel meeting, because Mr. Heiss, Randy, the executive, he's retiring.
Oh.
So there will be a change.
Okay.
So I'll be sure and, make sure
Yes.
the ball's not dropped there.
Okay. I'd appreciate it.
Sounds like you got a lot of support, and know that this council supports you and supports what CCAP is doing. And so you get all the literature that you need into the staff hands, and then John will get it to us, and we will write letters, whatever we need to do. If we
Thank
even
you.
need to knock on doors, we can do that, meaning in the legislature. Sometimes it does good, sometimes it doesn't, but
But we need to
any
give it a
help,
shot.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Right, thank you. Thank you so much.
Brings us to item 10.1, new and old business independent auditors report. Rob?
Great. Good evening, Mayor, members of the council. We're here tonight to introduce Brian Hemmerly. He's a partner with Baker Tilly, formerly known as Henry & Horn. Henry & Horn was hired as the city's independent auditor, and Brian is here remotely to give their opinion as to our affairs at fiscal year ending fiscal 22, June 30, fiscal 22. So I'll turn it over to Brian. Brian is remote with us this evening, and he's on conference phone up front. I will be here also to answer any questions that you may have. So Brian, I will turn the presentation over to you.
Okay, thanks, Rob. Rob, can you guys hear me okay?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, we can
All
hear you
good,
loud
thank
and
you.
clear.
Oh, great. And you see my slides then up there on the display?
Yes.
Okay,
everything
excellent.
looks
Thank you all for having me. Mr. Mayor, members of council. Again, my name is Brian Hemmerly. I'm the lead audit partner with formerly Henry & Horn, now Baker Tilly, which is a large firm that is based out of Chicago. It's a national firm. We joined them, and we are the sole Arizona office for Baker Tilly. So going forward, I will be referring to Baker Tilly in the presentation, but I'll keep this brief. This presentation is the presentation for your fiscal year June 30, 2022 financial statements. We did provide a clean opinion, what we call an unmodified opinion, on 4 reports. Your first report is the report on your financial statements, the large 200-some page financial statement report that you receive every year. That report received a clean opinion. We provide reasonable assurance that those numbers are materially correct. We do look at internal controls. We walk through those controls. We test controls. We do statistically valid sampling. Any major financial statement changes will be found in Note 1 this year. That will be where you can see if there were any differences from last year as far as governmental accounting standards that have been enacted during the year. We had no difficulties encountered in performing our audit this year. There were no uncorrected misstatements. We had no disagreements with anyone in management, and we're not aware of any audit shopping. Again, the report on the financial statements was an unmodified opinion, a clean opinion. The second report we issued was what we call a single audit report. This is a report that the federal government requires for any city or town that spends more than $750,000 of federal grant money. This year there were 2 grants that needed to be tested. The first grant was the Coronavirus State and Local Recovery Fund. Some people know it as ARPA, the American Recovery Program Act. And then we also had to test the capitalization of grants for drinking water state revolving funds. This is related to your WIFA grants, the ones that are used for your wastewater and water infrastructure projects. So there's some federal funding that's attached to some of those WIFA grants, the Water Infrastructure Finance Authority of Arizona, and we had to test some of that money. Overall, we tested $4.7 million of federal grant money. You did receive an unmodified opinion on that single audit. The federal government received that report today. Well, actually, they received it last week. We approved it today to go through to them, and there were no findings to report to them. So they have that officially. The third report here is your annual expenditure limitation report. This is required by the Arizona State Auditor General's Office. Your expenditure limitation for the 2022 year is derived from the Economic Estimates Commission, and that limitation this year was $103.6 million. After looking at the financial statements and calculating what expenditures are subject to that limitation, Safford is well below that limitation. You're at about $27.7 million, so you have $75.9 million of room between what is allowed to be spent based on that estimate commission limitation and what you've actually spent during the year. So way below the limitation for the year. So that was filed with the Auditor General's office timely, and there were no issues with that. And then the fourth report is related to your landfill post-closure liabilities and requirements with the Arizona Department of Environmental Quality. They have some financial requirements we look through to make sure you meet these ratios and requirements. Some of the items here are bullet pointed towards the bottom of the slide here. Cash to expenditure ratio has to meet 0.05. It did. Your debt to expenditure ratio meets the required 0.2. Your financial statements were audited by us, an independent CPA. You received an unmodified opinion. It was clean. And then there were no operating deficits greater than 5% of your revenues for the year. So those things were met, and that will be filed with ADEQ. We had no material weaknesses, no significant deficiencies during the year. And then there were really no major recommendation. There was one recommendation we mentioned in the governance letter we submitted. It was related to your local government investment pool investments with the state treasurer's office. The signers on that account are old and outstanding signers. They're signers from past councils. And so we made a recommendation to management of the city to get with the state treasurer's office and make sure those signers get updated as soon as they can. We've had this recommendation with other cities in the state before, and it's usually the treasurer's side that takes time to get that corrected. Sometimes you have to ask a few times before it actually gets corrected. Our understanding is there's things in motion to get that corrected, but the signers on those accounts need to be updated. Some real high-level financial highlights I'll briefly go over here. This is your governmental funds, so not your enterprise funds. This is not water, sewer, nothing like that. This is just your governmental funds. The red line there are your assets. The green line is your net position, and the dark brown is your liabilities. You'll see assets and liabilities had an increase this year. That's mostly due to the pension obligation bonds that were issued. What happens in this first year of a pension obligation bond is you still have the old pension liability on the books, and you have a new bond debt liability on the books. That causes the liabilities to go up. But to offset that in this first year is what we call a deferred outflow, which goes into the assets. Next year, what you'll see is that number will come back down because the assets will be applied against your pension liability, and that pension liability will go down on next year's financial statement. So that's really the big increase on the balance sheet this year for the governmental funds. Business type activities, there's really not a whole lot to talk about. It's pretty flat for the year. Nothing alarming on any one business type, water, sewer, nothing that came out, landfill, that we thought needed to be addressed here. Your cash, so this is your governmental cash, not your enterprise cash. Your cash each year continues to increase. This year didn't increase as much as the last 2 years, but that's probably okay because eventually you will have quite a bit of cash sitting out there in your bank accounts. The cash this year, mostly the increase comes from your sales tax increases. There was a nice increase in sales tax above that of what you budgeted for the past year. And then there was also those one-time grants from the federal government related to coronavirus finance acting and what you spend that money on. Some of that money, there's some residual there that hasn't quite probably been spent down as of June 30, 2022. Business type cash had a nice little increase this year, but nothing huge to be concerned with. You are obviously collecting your charges for services on those business type activities are higher than your expenses enough to maintain a positive cash flow. And that's my presentation. If there are any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Is your contract up with us this year?
Mr. Mayor, members of council, our contract was up last year. This year we're on a year-to-year at this point. So we essentially kept the price the same as the prior year, maybe a small increase, and then we went ahead and they moved forward with doing another audit with us. But theoretically, technically, the city is able to go out to bid for a new auditor at any time they'd like. I would suggest if the city does want to go out to bid, they'll probably want to start that process soon, because usually the auditors for next year's audit will want to get in and start the process about April, May is when we usually want to get in to start that process.
Thank you, sir.
Yes, sir.
What is the contracted amount, John?
I don't know, do you know what the contract?
You know, I don't remember.
Somebody-
Are you asking Rob? I'm sorry.
I don't care, somebody could answer that.
No,
I know it's.
Go ahead, Brian.
I think it's between 45 to 50,000 right now, somewhere in that range, on a year-to-year basis. That includes all 4 reports, our travel, all that stuff related to that.
And if I may add, Brian, Mayor and members of the council, there was also a change order that was necessary this year. As Brian indicated earlier in his presentation, as there's new accounting standards that come up, they need to go ahead and review that, and there were some accounting standard changes relative to leases. And so they had to categorize those, which was additional work on top of what they had originally bid or presented in their proposal from 5 years ago. So that was an item management did accept due to the fact that that needed to be done.
Anybody else have any questions? All right, I appreciate it, thank you.
So, Mayor, members of the council,
Thank
we do have the final reports. They will be in your inboxes starting tomorrow. So all the reports that Brian had indicated, not only the annual comprehensive financial report, but also those other elements of going to the Department of Economic Quality, the expenditure limitation report and single audit. A lot of information. I don't expect you to read it cover to cover, but if you have questions, I'll be glad to make myself available to answer questions you might have on an individual basis. So please reach out. Thank you.
Go ahead.
Well, we've done well with the Horn Enterprise, and in fact, over the past 3 years, we've won awards in our finance department. They've done well, so I'm not talking negative about them, but we'll find out who y'all might go with when that time comes.
Yes.
Sean?
Mayor, council, members of council, and Rob and I had discussions on this, and we're probably gonna look next year at keeping the same auditor for now, because as we bring on a new finance director, usually when you bring in a new auditor firm, they're gonna dig in a little deeper, so we probably wanna go with a firm that's still familiar with us before we actually go off for a new one.
Not gonna lie, I'm a little disappointed that they weren't here physically to do their presentation. I would like to see them, that's the reason why I asked what their contract amount was.
Right.
They could be here for that contract amount.
Mayor Couts, they contacted us and we basically set this up for them, so
Okay.
I'm sure they would have been willing to come down, but they had a compressed time frame, so we asked that they do it just so that we could get it on the first meeting in January. Otherwise, they would have come down and done it in person, as they have in the past.
Right. All right, anybody else? Okay, that brings us to item 10.2, which is our minutes. Tammy?
Thank you, Brian.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
I am requesting approval of the November 7th, 2022 work session minutes. Did everybody have a chance to look at them, and is there any questions?
I move we approve the November 7th, 22 work session minutes.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the minutes. Any discussion on those? Go ahead.
I have where it states in there that I believe the council manager asked council is interested in pursuing additional recreational programs, expanding volleyball, basketball, or starting a wrestling program. I kind of thought after we spoke about things that we weren't starting anything, we were facilitating things. So I just wanted to make that note.
You're not going to start the wrestling program?
Well, no, I want to be there, Safford, to help support it, but I don't want some of our staff running it.
I thought you were coaching it.
No.
Okay.
No, Mayor.
Okay.
I just want to make sure we don't put Jamie out there so far that she's the coach.
Tell me, is that
I'm
what
all
you
for
understood as well?
facilitating whatever they come up with, but not total ownership.
Yeah, Mayor, council, members of council, basically the way we approach it now, because they're small programs and they're new, is we usually contract out with a coach that runs the program, and that's the way we'll pursue it going forward.
Okay, I have a motion by the Vice Mayor, and I have a second by Councilman Hemphill to approve the minutes for the work session in November 7th of 2022. Any more discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion passes. Brings us to item 11.1, resolution R23-05, airport runway taxi and grant. That'll be by Cameron.
Yes. Good evening, Mayor and Council. This is a request for Mayor and Council to review and approve Resolution R23-005, accepting a grant from the Arizona Department of Transportation's Airport Surface Treatment Program 2023 to assist in funding a mill and overlay for Taxiway A at Safford Regional Airport with a construction estimate of $571,488 and authorizing the city manager to execute this agreement. Staff recommends authorization. Some background, this is an airport pavement management system grant and will consist of a mill and overlay and pavement markings for Taxiway A, the airport's primary taxiway. Under the Airport Surface Treatment Program, ADOT designs, supports the bidding process, and administers the construction of the maintenance projects. ADOT will pay 100% of the design and construction administration costs. ADOT will then pay the full construction cost to the contractor, with the city contributing a 10% share of the construction costs. The city's estimated share of this project is $57,149, and payment of the city's share is due to ADOT upon acceptance of the grant. Staff is recommending accepting funding for a mill and overlay project. The local match of $57,148.80 would come from FY 22-23 contingency funds to cover the expenditure, and reserves would provide the revenue. This time I will stand for questions.
So we're covering it with our contingency funds money? Because we didn't budget for this, is that correct?
Correct. This is a mid-year program.
Contingency funds have been hit pretty hard, huh?
I believe so.
Interesting. Go ahead, John.
The contingency part is the appropriation, so that basically says you have the ability to expend
Right.
funds. The funds for the project are coming from outside the city, so it's not that we're spending our own money, we're just.
Well, we're spending 57,000 of it.
Right, well, we do have the match, yeah.
Right. I get it. I understand how it
Okay,
works.
all right.
All right. Entertain a motion.
I move we approve resolution R23-005, the airport taxiway grant.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve resolution R23-005. Any more discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Thanks, Cameron. And you'll also be doing resolution 23-06. Oh, I'm sorry. Go right ahead.
Resolution number R23-005, a resolution of the mayor and city council of the city of Safford, Graham County, Arizona, authorizing the city manager to accept a grant for state funds from the Arizona Department of Transportation for the purpose of aiding and funding a project for a mill and overlay and pavement markings for Taxiway A at the Safford Regional Airport.
Thank you. Resolution 23-6. Cameron?
Yes. Good evening again, Mayor and Council. This is a request from Mayor and Council to approve resolution number R23-006, a resolution adopting the Safford Regional Airport leasing policy. Some background: as part of the update to the rules and regulations and minimum operating standards, staff noticed that there was a lack of guidance or rules regarding leasing ground or buildings at the airport. Staff prepared a leasing policy to ensure that airport land was being put to its best use. The leasing policy was presented to Council at the December 12, 2022 Council meeting as a work session item. This new policy ensures that the airport is in compliance with FAA grant assurances and state law, while also ensuring that land at the airport is put to its best use as the airport continues to grow and develop. One thing I would like to emphasize here is the whole purpose of this policy is to ensure that when we go out and we have somebody that comes to the airport and says they want to lease land, or multiple people want the same piece of land, it then enters a competitive bid process that, rather than it being a financial bid, it's a bid that puts it to the best use. What's going to be the best use for the airport and the community. This time I'll stand for questions.
Would you repeat that?
I apologize, Councilmember or Vice Mayor. So the purpose of this policy is, rather than having a financial bid for ground at the airport, if two businesses or two individuals want the same piece of land, rather than us doing a financial bid process, this allows us to do a best use bid. They submit what their use is going to be, what kind of revenue they're going to generate, what kind of revenue that's going to bring to the airport, and then we have a board essentially that would form at that point and determine what's going to be the best use for that property at the airport.
That's what I thought I heard, and I like that. I like that approach very much. Yeah.
And this is also part of why we brought you here, is to help us put these policies together.
Absolutely.
Thank you, sir.
No problem.
Well, I move we approve resolution R23-006, airport leasing policy.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve resolution 23-6, the airport leasing policy. Any more discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. You want to read that one?
Resolution number R23-006, a resolution of the mayor and city council of the city of Safford, Graham County, Arizona, approving the Safford Regional Airport leasing policy.
Thank you. Bring us to item 11.3, Resolution 23-7, staff gifts and cancellation policy.
Yeah, good evening, Mayor and members of the council. Staff is recommending an update or amendment to the existing staff gift and solicitation policy to align with best practices, as well as comply with tax laws, and clearly communicate to the employees what is acceptable regarding gifts and solicitation at the worksite. The draft is included in your packet tonight. As a point of background as to why staff is making the recommendation, first and foremost, it's a fairly dated policy itself, last touched and updated in December of 1999. And it did not identify the tax implications of any gifts that may have been given to employees from the city of Safford. So while past practices fairly aligned with tax requirements, what was missing was the communication to the employees as to why they would have to pay a tax on a gift that was provided to them by the city. So we wanted to make sure we updated that in order to get rid of any general confusion that may exist among the staff and ensure that we're complying with state and federal statutes. So the purpose of the policy is pretty straightforward, really to clarify those acceptable practices related to gifts being offered by third parties is one element. So the city appreciates when our business partners recognize good work of our employees, but we also want to make sure we don't cross the line of any conflict of interest or that there's any undue question as to the relationship that the city or a city employee might have with that vendor or with the contractor. We also wanted to identify as clearly as possible, as much as you can make tax issues clear, what would be considered taxable requirements relative to any gift that the city were to provide to those employees. And finally, we wanted to define and leave within the policy what is acceptable workplace activities regarding solicitation or basically the distribution of materials at the worksite. So as part of putting the updated policy together and coming up with our amendments, we did receive a written legal opinion in regards to what would be required of any organization that would be gifting to employees and what would be our exposure from a tax perspective. We also did our own review of internal service, the IRS regulations, as well as some of the court cases to understand what level, if we were to set a level of a value, what does the court say in regards to that number. We looked to state statutes relative to conflict of interest, as well as the state accounting manual that defines that as well, at least for state agencies that we could leverage. And finally, we reviewed existing policies, most notably to other local jurisdictions as well as higher education. So the big question, is it taxable? And when I was in grad school, the answer to that question was always, it depends, because there are lots of different variables. So it's very hard to sit there and say, well, this is, that isn't, if in fact you don't go through some sort of a risk factor or decision tree. One thing the IRS does allow for is the concept of de minimis, meaning it's so minimal in frequency or so minimal in value that trying to account for it is impractical or is just a waste of time. So the IRS has defined certain things that are de minimis. So your Turkey Tuesday, by definition in their regulations, it says a holiday ham or turkey is not taxable. Your periodic picnics where you are paying for employees to get together, that's also considered de minimis. There's no way for me to find out how many sandwiches that person or that employee had versus another. So you just don't account for it. And finally, the IRS also defines things as de minimis, such as the flowers here I have as an example. They do define that within their regulations, that if you give a periodic gift of something so small, we would consider that non-taxable. But in the IRS world, when they say is it taxable, there is something that is always taxable, and that is cash or a cash equivalent, or AKA a gift card. It doesn't matter the value. It could be $1, it could be $5, it could be $1,000. The IRS looks at that and says, nah, that's not de minimis, always taxable. So we would always need to find a way in which to process that as a taxable fringe benefit to the employees. But the IRS also defines perhaps things that could be de minimis, but we need to understand the value of those items. So something here, you have a barbecue and a set of barbecue supplies. Is it taxable? Well, it depends. And that's where that comes in. We have to understand the value of each of those items to determine is it taxable or not. So there are court cases out there that drew the limit of anything over $100 would be considered de minimis, would not be considered de minimis, meaning it's taxable. So it's easy to account for something over $100. But they said if something's at 100 or under, you can call it de minimis. So before we would process this, we have to understand, was that barbecue grill over $100? If so, taxable. How about that gift basket? Was it under $100 or up to $100? If not, that would be non-taxable gift to the employee. So this is where we're asking staff as they're gifting, or managers, or even the Employee Appreciation Committee to come to us and say, well, we want to do these following things. Would it be taxable or not? So we can set that course up ahead of time. So to ensure compliance, the policy does have procedural elements into it. So we make sure that if we are buying gifts for employees and gifting them to them, that we're getting their names and the value, and we would then understand whether it's taxable or not. How the process works is we would then process that on the next payroll, and it's a taxable fringe benefit to them, and then would be reported on their W-2 to both the federal government and the state. So while they're gaining a value of that gift, there is unfortunately tax rules. You can't get away from it, and we want to make sure that Safford complies, and we want to make sure that the employee has no exposure as well. So Mayor and members of the council, staff is recommending approval of Resolution R23-007, the amended staff gifts and solicitation policy. Be glad to answer any questions or provide clarification. Thank you.
No, I got a lot of questions. I don't think that would be legal either, so.
You won't think what will be, what?
What I would ask might suggest not being legal, because I don't, you know, we put 20,000 in for gifts. I don't know if that shows intent that it's gonna be, just a bunch of things go through my mind. That's why I didn't ask.
So if you have a value of you're saying of the $20,000 that's in the budget, right?
Yeah.
So that in and itself doesn't make it taxable. It's each element to the employee
Yeah,
that would define
I
taxability.
didn't want some intent to come back later.
Right.
Mayor, Council.
Go ahead.
Members of council, so what we've done is, and we talked about this previously, so what we've done is we've written up a series of guidelines for the Employee Appreciation Committee, and with the warning that you gave about not making it too onerous, we tried to make it as clear-cut as possible, and leaving most of the members that are there now in place for an extended period of time. We also have defined in the budget process where each of the events that we have is now going to be project coded, so that we know exactly which projects are receiving what items. And then with listings of those items being vetted in that process, we can then determine whether or not they'll be taxable or not. So we've done things procedurally that will help us identify within that $21,000 that we budget as a lump sum. As that money gets expended, most of the main events that we do, or events that we do, will be project coded, and then we can track the items that are purchased for those events.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
So, I mean, it's just talking to the employees, yeah, they're not really happy about this, but, so is there a way that the city can pay those taxes, or it has to be that individual?
Yes. Mayor and members of the council, there is a way in order for any organization to pay those taxes. As a matter of point, we did that relative to the holiday bonus that was just processed. That very well could happen, but talking to other jurisdictions that were, quote, grossing that value up, it is a lot of work. It was easy to do the same amount across the board for everybody, but each one trying to gross up, let's say, a $20 gift card, really the administrative staff time to do each one of those individually gets to become burdensome. It doesn't matter to the IRS. They don't care if it's burdensome. They just are saying it would be taxable, and you need to make sure that tax is withheld and submitted to both the state and to the federal government. We could look at that if that's the desire of the mayor and the council to do that, but at least from a staff's recommendation perspective, we would look at doing what I would call a grossing up for those elements where it might be the holiday bonus or that one-time bonus, to where it would be equal across the board.
Yeah, just for instance, the Christmas party, my son-in-law won one of the grand prizes, but he didn't want to take it because he didn't want to pay taxes on it. So he kept his little vacuum, whatever he bought, whatever he won. So it's kind of like, we want to give him a gift, but then, I don't know.
Right.
But also on the birthday cards, I mean, can people opt out of that?
Mayor, members can opt out of receiving the cards, or?
Yeah, because if they don't want, like, some people can use it, like, if they can't have ice cream. I mean, I know of several employees that can't. I mean, are we taxing them because they, because we're giving them a birthday card and you can't use it?
Right. Mayor, members of the council, that's been a little challenge for us as well, and where we're working with the Employee Appreciation Committee to say, is there a way in which we could ensure that we're providing gifts and or thanks to employees that also doesn't cause a burden from a tax perspective. Even if it's a $5 gift card, have a great birthday, in the eyes of the IRS, that's taxable. Now, if it came from Rob Sweeney's pocket and given to that employee and not coming through the city's treasury, it would not be considered a gift. But I can't take it from my pocket, give it to John, who then as city manager provides it to that employee. It then would then become the city's gift to that employee. So we have to look at each individual item, and that's where we want to work closely with the Employee Appreciation Group, so that way we're doing right by the employees. We as management and staff want to make sure we appreciate them, but not also burden them relative to taxation. And when they think, great, I just got a gift and now I had to pay X in taxes.
Right, and just, Mayor Couts, Councilman Arbizo, and again, Rob, jump in if I'm wrong, but, we keep talking about it being taxable. What you're doing is declaring additional income. So in terms of your overall tax burden, you may declare that income. It doesn't mean that it's gonna change your tax burden. It may some slight amount. So the idea that it's taxable, it's really that you're declaring additional income is the main act that occurs, and the taxability of it is then taken into account with all your other income. So if you get a cooler and you declare it as taxable income and you're making $60,000 a year, likely the overall tax exposure for you on that item at the end of the year will be negligible.
Yes. Mayor and members of the council, yes, that is true. So what ends up in their withholding and reported via the W-2 would then come back to them if their tax burden wasn't any greater. But we have a duty as an employer that's required of us, as any fringe benefit or any taxable benefit to them, we have to tax it. Otherwise, it is a negative to us, and there are penalties to us as an employer. So we withhold it, submit it, and then that employee, when they do their taxes, their net tax it may not have gone up, and so what they just put in, they'll get back April 15th.
And this just applies to employees?
Yes, Mayor and members of the council, this applies to employees. The other elements of the policy that deal with conflict of interest, as well as solicitation or distributing materials, would apply to all employees, contractors, or volunteers.
But not ordinary citizens?
Yes, Mayor and members of the council, that's correct.
Luke brought up, Councilman Arvizo brought up a good point. That's something that I don't quite understand why it wasn't looked into, is the opportunity of us as an organization to go ahead and pay the tax. And, you guys are saying that it's minimal to the individual. Well, then it would be minimal to the organization as well. You mentioned that it would take a little bit of extra work, but that's what we're here for. We're here to serve the community. We're here to also to serve our own people that work for us. So, to me, it's something that we should be looking into. And so if we approve this resolution tonight, does that stop you from looking into possibly bringing it back to us and saying, hey, here's what it would, once we met with the community board or whatever it is that we have, and we're going to give out $20 gift, whatever, so we're going to be taxable on that, you're looking at the maximum taxable amount by the time we give 100 of them away is only going to be $500 in taxes. Then bring that and let us know what that's going to be, because we might just say, let's just eat that. Councilman Arbizo brought up a really good point that I would really like for us to be looking into, because I'm not afraid of a little bit more work. I just don't think we should be afraid of a little bit more work.
Yes.
That's what I feel.
Yeah, Mayor and members of the council, I hope it didn't say I didn't want to do the work. It becomes more of a challenge because each value could very well be different, and then each individual person's tax situation could very well be different. There's variables we'd have to go through, and again, if that's the desire of the mayor and council, we certainly could do that.
Rob, very understandable, I understand what you're saying, but we also have approved approximately, I think Councilman Lopez said, $20,000 that's gifted to this organization to give away stuff. So we already have a number on that we're not gonna go above 20,000. So by the time you give out igloos, cookers, baskets, whatever it is, at the end of the year, we can't go over that 20,000 because that's what we budgeted for. So we do have a number on that. Now it's just a matter of and I understand what you're saying, because Councilman Arbiza will get a cooler and I might just get a $10, ice cream sandwich, I don't know. So I understand what you're saying, but nevertheless, I think it's something that we should look into.
Kevin?
Okay, McGoy first, Councilman McGoy.
I can see where everybody's tax liability is different. You can't guess how this is gonna, a $5 Dairy Queen card is gonna affect somebody else's taxes. But my question is, if I do get that and don't declare it, does that put me as an employee in jeopardy with the IRS? Because I'm probably gonna forget that Empire hat or that $5 gift card and not declare it.
Mayor, members of the council, first and foremost, that liability is placed upon the gifting organization, so in this case, the city. So we have a duty in which to report that. It probably would be very difficult for any auditor in any jurisdiction to find that relative to an individual person unless they first came to a city or a business and looked at their records and found out $20,000 was spent on employee gifting, and then let's see where that trail would go. So it would first hit us, and as a business, if you will, as an organization, we would then be liable for that payment.
But by the time that hits you, we've all filed our taxes and not declared it. I'm just curious as to whether that puts us in jeopardy.
Yeah, Mayor, members of council, if that were to happen, we wouldn't go back and then try to seek some retro, because we would be crossing fiscal calendar years at that point. It would be a penalty to Safford if, in fact, a Department of Revenue from the state or the IRS came and looked at our treasury and in our payroll process.
And Councilman McGoy, I think we also would be the ones who would be declaring that value on the part of the employee. So we would be the ones who would say, we've given you the gift card, and it would be the finance department that would assess it. So it's not as if the employee would have an option at that point, given our current.
So that would be part of your W-2 then?
Yes.
Okay. All right, thank you.
I just want to be a little careful that, you use the word burdensome, that's a lot of little jobs that have to be done, and I kind of think where that time could be put someplace else too. You know what I mean? Just figuring out the gift cards, different amounts and things like that. Does that make any sense? I don't want to overload staff with nickel and dime little jobs. We can always do that. And that's kind of the way I think of that.
It's a simple spreadsheet. It's once it gets built, they might have an hour building the spreadsheet, and then the next thing you know, it turns. Just like the Horns brought up just a little bit ago, that they had to come back in and do some extra auditing over our leases and stuff. It's not burdensome.
It's a lot of employees.
Anyway, I'm not in favor of approving this resolution right now until we get more clarity on it. I don't know if you guys want to table this, or if you guys want to go ahead and make a motion and leave it as it is.
I make a motion, we table this.
Mayor, Council, before we go forward with that, I don't believe that approving this would stop us from taxing it differently. It's just saying that the tax burden is there.
Okay.
So again, I don't know, correct me if I'm
Rob,
wrong.
can you address that and make sure that that's correct?
Right. Correct. The current draft policy, Mayor, members of the council, does not suggest one way or the other that we would put that full burden on the employee, or that the employer would gross that up and pay it. So a matter of policy, if on any given fiscal year, when you adopt the budget and you say, for this $20,000 and any gift that would be required taxes, we would like that to be grossed up and have the city pay those taxes on their behalf. So the fact of that it's required is really what the policy says. It has to be processed as taxable. The policy is not saying who shall pay it, other than it's going to be processed and ending up on the employee's W-2 at the end of the year. Just like on the holiday bonus, we paid all those statutorily required benefits on behalf of the employee based on that, because that was the motion we brought relative to transacting those dollars. So Mayor and members of the council, I see them as mutually exclusive. The policy is saying here's what shall be done in regards to reporting
Okay.
versus how would we transact it.
Okay, all right. Councilman Anzola, would you restrict, or would you pull back your motion?
I withdraw my motion,
Okay.
as usual.
I move that we approve resolution R 23-007, staff gifts and solicitation policy.
Second.
We have a motion.
Solicitation policy, I'm sorry.
We have a motion and a second to approve resolution 23-007 for the gifts and the solicitation policy, and that gives us the ability to at least you guys to negotiate some other stuff. So, any other discussion on this? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Go ahead, Tammy. Thanks,
Resolution
Rob.
number R 23-007, a resolution of the mayor and city council of the city of Safford, Graham County, Arizona, approving the amended staff gifts and solicitation policy for city of Safford employees, volunteers, and contractors.
All right, thank you. Brings us to item 12, announcement of current events. Anybody have any current events? Okay, item 13, request for future agenda items.
Mayor, I have a unique question. I don't know if Mr. Sims is going to be able to answer this question. I would like all exit interviews from employees that have resigned underneath Mr. Casella. And that's what I'm requesting for.
What was that again?
I want to see all the exit interviews from the people that have resigned underneath Mr. Casella.
Okay, anybody else? At this time, I have a couple I would, it doesn't necessarily have to be under an agenda, but I would go ahead and ask that John carries out us looking for a police chief. I believe it's, we've received a letter of retirement, and I think it's time that we start that process, knowing how hard it's been for us to get a finance director, since Rob obviously doesn't want to stay at this beautiful city. And we start moving forward, and who knows, our candidate could be one that's sitting in the room or what. But I think it's time that you move forward with that, and so I have that.
Okay. Is the police chief going to be doing an exit interview too?
I have.
I'd like to see that if that's possible too.
I believe you would do one like everybody else, right?
Anybody else have anything under agenda? I have one more. Councilman Lopez, last year we kind of set aside yours with the chief of police and the fire department chief, and we were talking about the process of the hiring and the firing of that. I don't know if you want to bring that back up now, or you want me to, because I think it's time that we move forward on that.
Well, I don't all know what became of it. I just gave the example that you guys voted on the fire chief to be the same as the police chief because you felt it was a certain way, but it wasn't. I didn't know if you wanted to pursue that or not, so, but
Yeah,
however you want to carry
I
it
think
now.
I would like for that to get on the agenda as well, to talk about the how we are doing the hiring and firing of the police chief and the fire chief, and I think it's time that we talk about it amongst us and move forward with that and come away with what we thought originally was what we thought, and it wasn't, and so we move forward with that.
So Mayor Council, are those the two you want, police chief, fire chief?
Yes, I think those two need to be on there, but I think we need to leave that very open to for discussion too, okay? I don't think that we're involved in any hiring and firing process, or right
Well,
now.
it varies. So you have different flavors. There are those department heads who there's no council involvement at all. There are some department heads where there's involvement in the approval of the hiring process, but not the firing process. And then the only department head who has an approval on the hiring and the firing would be the police chief.
Okay. Yeah, so we need to find, I need to know what we have. I don't even know what we have. You know, I mean, I understood when I was originally elected years ago that we were just policymakers. And so now we dipped ourselves into different waters. And so I would just like to know where we stand and what we are.
Okay.
Mayor, if I could go back to Councilman Andazola's request on the exit interviews, do we need to, is there a certain way we need to address that now to get it on the agenda other than just wanting them? Or do we want to have a discussion about what we want to do with them if we get them? Or, I don't know how that best winds up as an agenda item, I guess is what I'm wondering.
And Mayor Couts, and I would ask also that, you know, exit interviews pertaining to the city manager probably should apply to those who work for the city manager, not every single employee. Otherwise, you'd be getting exit interviews from everybody in the organization, and many of whom didn't report to me.
So, our city attorney, by the way, I didn't introduce him, and I apologize for that. He's just so good looking over there. He was making John actually look good, and so I didn't.
Thanks, Mayor.
But anyway, public, this is Bill Sims, and so I would like to revert that back to our city attorney and ask Bill how we can proceed on this.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you for having me here. And we're getting into the next item. The last time I was here, David Kincaid was your manager. And we're going to talk about what I'm discussing with you later, ways I can best serve you. Because I'm currently the town attorney or city attorney for eight cities and towns, and I work for 77 through the RIS pool. And there's a variety of ways I could serve you inexpensively as opposed to driving down here. But for example, I'm not here at most meetings. And what I just heard is a good question. And I think the question that was asked really is one that the counselor could pick up the phone and call the manager and say, I'd like to see the exit interviews. Now, because, but to the extent you need to put it on an agenda item, I don't know that that's appropriate, because it would only be appropriate evaluating him. Because you don't evaluate employees but below him. Leaving aside, you do have a very complicated relationship with your fire chief and police chief. And I do agree with you, Mr. Mayor, that needs to be clarified. But generally, I think you have every right to look at those exit interviews. I think the manager points out you only want to look at them for ones that report to him you don't need.
Yes.
And I don't know that you need a council action. I mean, you have the right, you as a counselor have the right to inquire about information. And that's information that you can pick up the phone and ask, meaning you don't really need an agenda item unless you detected a problem and you want to do it as part of an evaluation of the manager, then you would need an agenda item.
Yeah, and the only reason why I brought it up, Mr. Sims, was because we received an email on one individual. And I was inquiring about the other ones now, about the
Okay.
rest of the individuals who are supervising, their directors and all that.
Yes, sir.
That's what I'm asking for, okay? I'm not asking for anybody else.
But Mr. Mayor, this dialogue shows you sometimes the benefit or the detriment of having an attorney watching. But then you asked a question and I was able to answer. And the question is, do I need to be here to answer? Almost in all of my jurisdictions, I do it virtually,
Right.
to the extent you can, or I do it or on the phone. I'm the Globe City attorney, and I do it. They have me on every one of theirs, but it's virtual. Most cities and towns, you don't need your attorney every meeting. When actually, I was here, Huey Long. That's how long I go back.
Mm-hmm.
And Garn was your attorney. He was in-house, and you decided to hire outhouse.
Right.
And so you went from almost a $300,000 a year budget to something substantially less, because honestly, with a good manager and a good clerk who know when to call me, that's the best way to use your attorney.
Absolutely.
And so, but the dialogue we just had is the kind of dialogue that I owe you as your city attorney, because you could just pick up the phone. I don't think you need to include the entire rest of your council. You have every right to inquire. But the point you made, to the extent there's an issue, then it could be an agenda item with respect to evaluating the manager.
And so I think John and myself are of an agreement, and I'll say that loosely, and John, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think anything that's shared with one council member goes to all.
Correct, and of course, the other thing I would say is that when we do this, given the fact that these evaluations will have people's names on them, we probably would want to keep them confidential. So even if at some point you decided you wanted to dialogue about their content, I think an executive session would probably be appropriate.
It would be a challenge to be discussing an employee they don't supervise. I mean, I don't know how you could get, talking to someone who is meter reading, how you would be evaluating them in any
So I think we agree that you would want to see the ones that directly
Yeah.
report it to me, right?
That's right.
Yes.
And so even if we did those, because there aren't that many, in terms of their confidentiality, we could put together the packet and give it to you, then you could decide at some later date if you wanted to dialogue further. But for the sake of those employees and their confidentiality, I would think, and I don't know, Bill, you can tell me if I'm wrong, that would happen in an executive session for their sake. But we can supply that. I mean, like I said, there's not that many of them, but I would give you the ones that are direct reports to me.
Yeah, I don't know that it needs to go into e-session, I mean,
All right,
because
so
they would have an opportunity to be here themselves if we're gonna be discussing somebody, correct, in an e-session. So I think that, I think that Councilman Anzola, instead of this being on the, on an agenda items, are you okay that we made this known and that he gets this to you?
Yes,
And-
I would like it to everybody in an email.
Okay,
Yeah, we can put together a packet, and we'll give it to the whole council.
okay, all right. So,
Thank you.
Sure.
Councilman McGoy?
Are we ready for the next item?
I just wanna make sure we have,
It says on the
yeah.
agenda.
Okay, hang on one second. You guys okay? We good? All right, Councilman McGoy, you have another agenda?
I just want to confirm that when I talked to you here a month or so back about landfill policy, that's coming up sometime.
Yeah, Mayor, Councilman McGuire, I believe you were gonna send me some type of an email that kind of laid out some of the issues that you were having so that we could kind of address specifically what you were asking about. If you wanted general policy in terms of how we address the landfill, we could do that too.
I can do that, but I did want to just look at the policy specifically the who can dump free and how that works and how you have to prove your identity and all that stuff. I've got a lot of complaints all at the same time, and
Okay.
I just wanted to see it. I don't know that anything needs to change. I just think it needs to be reviewed every once in a while.
Would it be okay if we approached it maybe similarly to the request for the exit interviews, where we give you an informational packet to council as a whole, and then if there are questions, we can then do a work session?
That'd be fine, sure.
Okay.
Anybody else? You guys, this is the time for us to really, to talk about stuff and put stuff that we feel that we need to involve more than our two people, or, so that we can actually get down to some things. So it's a good time for discussion, to bring up items. Anybody else have anything? It's a council meeting for us. Arnold, you don't have anything.
No, I'm looking forward to the one that's coming.
Okay. All right. Report on operational items. We're going to start off with our procedural issues regarding the presence of our city attorney. Bill, you've hit a little bit of it.
Yes, Mr. Mayor.
I like how fast you talk. You're my kind of guy.
Well, that's when you pay me by the hour, you like that better.
Exactly.
I'll talk slower.
No.
Because I really thank John, for me to come down and meet you and meet many of the staff who have only met on the phone. This was a classic opportunity. We'll get into the slides in a minute. But just to show you the kinds of things that can happen in having an attorney, a couple things just now in this meeting. There was a discussion about possibly tabling an item. You have every right to table an item. And what I'm telling you is what I've learned in my other 7 or 8 cities. You have every right under Robert's rules to table, but the minute you table, you need a second. And then at the next meeting, you have to have 2 action items. 1 to take it off the table, and then 2 to act. Now, you have every right to table, but a way around that is, because you do this in every meeting, is, for example, you have this item, I'm directing the manager to take this back and bring it back at a future meeting. Then you don't need to table it. I do think since it was an action item, I think the full board, full council could say, we affirm that direction, and then you don't need to go through the drill of a table. But if it's so formal that you would like to table, you have every right to do that. But that gets to another, that I was talking to your clerk. Your code makes the Roberts Rules discretionary to the discretion of the mayor. And when you're gonna, I'm getting into my slides, but let me just, then we'll get to the slides in just a second. Is Robert's Rules is almost 600 pages. And if you go to the league gives you a 6-page summary, which is a good way to use Robert's Rules. Because honestly, Robert's Rules is meant to be a shield to protect discussion. Some use it as a sword to prevent action. And then you just get totally balled up into making decisions. Then the second item is making motions. You took your motion back, which you have every right to do. That was the motion to table. I have other jurisdictions where you have a motion, there's a second, there's discussion, and then there's an amendment. So then the amendment requires a second. And so under Robert's Rules and under the short form of the league, you need to vote on the amendment first before you get to the motion. And then when you vote on the motion, it'll either be as amended or not amended. And then the third issue, and the clerk and I was watching you raise hands when you took a vote, and we've had this discussion. There was a statute in the open meeting law that said she has to write down how everybody votes. And it works when you have an electronic system that she can look up, and the electronic system will show when it isn't unanimous. And I pointed out to her, I think you need to have a roll call. And she said, well, no, Bill, we do it by hand. And you're right, I saw it by hand. But you need to give her time to look to see who voted so she can mark it down. And if you have an abstention, because I don't know how you do holding a hand up on an extension, but this was a dialogue I had with your clerk. Because that law was passed. My governments have had difficulty doing it. The way we do it is, if it's unanimous, the mayor says it's unanimous, and the clerk says, in the minutes says it's unanimous. All future items on this agenda that were unanimous, I will reflect as unanimous. And my other, because I work for smaller cities and towns, and we don't have the electronic system, and they all do roll call. You're the only one who does hands, and you're right, Madam Clerk. You can do hands, but if they take their hands down too fast, you need to let her ask you, hold your hand up so I can get the right, because the law, that's what the law requires.
Or
And then
not
finally,
raise at all.
Pardon?
I said, or not raise at all.
Oh yeah, that's a good point. If you don't raise, then we don't know what to do. But then we'll get to the slides. Let's get to the slides. How do we do that?
Yeah, we just have there's a really big football game going. That's why I was trying to go quick.
Okay,
I'm just kidding. I'm just
We'll go fast.
kidding.
I will go fast. I will
I'm
go
just
fast.
kidding.
No, Mr. Mayor, because as I was driving down here, as I was pulling into Safford, I had a clerk call me from another jurisdiction, and I'll go through quickly on the slides. And one of the council members sent an email to the entire council discussing an item. And she called me right then, and I said, send an email out immediately to the entire council not to open it. Why? You trigger a reporting obligation, and I've dealt with the AG's omelet, the Open Meeting Law Enforcement Task Force. I've met them a lot. And the best way to do it, in this city we're gonna do it, is we told everybody not to open. That's the remedial action. If indeed one did, we will put that on an agenda in the future to say this happened, and we'll give that counselor the open meeting law training. So, but that's why, now we'll do the slides. And I promise, Mr. Mayor, this will go quick, because I talk fast.
I'm just joking. I'm just
No,
having fun.
Mr. Mayor. I've been working for you. You're one of the few I know from this council. The open meeting law requires everything to be open. You have a great clerk who uses this. You have to all have training before you take office, and you can get that training usually from your clerk. And you put the materials on your website. Next slide. What are the requirements? You have to give the notice. The notice isn't just the 24 hours. For example, I know I've worked with your staff. If you're raising fees, you've got to give a 60-day notice on your website. So it's not just the 24 hours. And the responsibility falls to your clerk. And for example, if you were in my other jurisdiction, that was the manager who called, the clerk would have the responsibility with me to notify the AG, because it's much better just to say, it was a minor screw up, this is what we're doing, and we end it. Next slide. This just really walks through the mechanics, and you do it well, but let's do it step by step. is, because you do a little different here. What you do is you have your call to you have your public have the discussion at the outset of the meeting. You're my only jurisdiction who does that, so let's just go do this. Mayor introduces the item. Mayor invites usually staff to propose. Mayor asks council if you have questions. And then once the questions are asked, the council member makes a motion. Then you have the second. That gets back to the whole issue of amendment, and if you have an amendment, you have to worry about that. The mayor then invites discussion from the council. In my other jurisdictions, this is when the public would talk. You do your call to the public at both for agenda items and non-agenda items. And sometimes, Mr. Mayor, I'm told, sometimes you say, if it's an agenda item, wait and do it. So that is, all my other jurisdictions, they do it at the agenda item, but you do it differently, okay? You then announce the vote, and that gets back to the roll call versus raising the hands. And I do think you need to be careful and hold your hands up carefully. You repeat the motion, and then you announce the vote. And I really did enjoy how you handled the election to the vice mayor, because your clerk and I had a discussion. Technically, under Robert's rules, you don't require a second for nominations. You don't, and I asked, and you don't. Some of my jurisdictions do, and so you do that under Robert's rules if you wish. But if you can't tell, I'm not a big fan of Robert's rules, as I am a big fan of the really short red form. If you don't have it, Tammy, I'll get it. It's the league man. That is the easiest thing to do, and that you leave it to the mayor to implement that. Next slide. I think we've talked. These are the big ones. We've talked about seconding. We've talked about tabling. Oh, and there is a requirement under the statute that you do need to formally vote to go into e-session. But then I've had the conundrum. Well, Bill, if we have to vote to go in, how do we get out? Because technically, it would be impossible to get out. You would be in e-session for the rest of your life because you can't vote. And so, but that's why it is a bit insane, but the statute says you need to vote to go into e-session. Next slide. What do you need to include in the regular minutes? And your clerk does it well. A date and time, members present, a general description of the matters discussed, an accurate description of the legal actions. This is where you need to, she needs to identify who voted and how. So if it's not unanimous, you've got to give her a time to see your hands. And if you have an emergency, you need to explain the emergency. Next slide. Here's one. Do you all tape e-sessions? Do you? Okay.
Yeah.
Most governments don't, but you have every right to if you wish. But the e-session minutes are very minimal compared to what she puts in your regular session minutes. It is date and time, who was there, summary of the discussions, just very general. A general description of the matters discussed, and most importantly, normally you have an e-session, usually to either give your finance person or your manager or a direction as to a real estate matter, and I don't need to be on that one, or if it's legal advice, I do need to be in that one, and then you would because you're giving direction, there's nothing in the public, and so your clerk wants to put in the minutes the direction you gave me, and we're going to have an e-session tonight on Chase that we're going to have that kind of discussion. Next slide, please. You have to, again, the goal of the open meeting law is to make the public known. Madison, one of the founding fathers, said, government can't work, democracy can't work if the public is informed. That's why we have the open meeting law. The final minutes or recording must be available, draft within three business days, and you generally have recordings, don't you? Is that what you do? Yeah, that's easy. Following approval, they post it within 2 business days. Minutes must remain on the website a year, and they're all subject to the public records law. Next slide. I talked about this. I just think you be careful using the parliamentary rules, but I was really impressed when you made the motion for table, and then you asked him to rescind. That's perfectly the way to go. I mean, if you're going to use that would be even under the simple Robert's rules. You did that correctly, Mr. Mayor.
Probably because you were sitting there. I can't take the credit. If you weren't there, I'd probably just roll with it.
No.
No, I have to coach you, tell the truth.
Okay, I'm going to send you, there's a much shorter form. If you don't like the red form, the league form, I'm going to send Tammy and John the Rosenberg rules, but I would go with the league's red form, okay?
And just a question, real quick question for council. Do you think it would be advisable maybe to have maybe a refresher?
Absolutely.
You know,
I
once a
just want to
year?
say, whoever's changing the slides needs to send this to To us.
Okay,
Absolutely, and then I agree. We should have one, Robert's rules or something really quick.
basics.
They teach you did mention, Bill, they did teach us at the leagues and towns, but sometimes they just go over it and it's so brief and so, like, anyway. And
Well,
I mean,
the reason
when
the
you
league-
teach it, it's pretty dang good, but when other ones teach it, it's like you just don't want to sign up for
well,
it.
no, I know how to make you not fall asleep.
Yeah.
Right.
Right,
I really get you involved. And so,
Absolutely.
Here, for conflicts, this is something that does happen a lot. And all you need to do is to remember, conflicts aren't bad. We want people with a variety of backgrounds, and you may have a conflict. If you have a conflict, you just need to tell the clerk. The clerk keeps a special set of minutes that show you have the conflict, and then you recuse yourself. Here's a question. I don't know what you do. Some jurisdictions, if you have a conflict, make the counselor remove him or herself from the dais. Do you guys do that?
No.
No.
Good. I can't believe you have to do that, because they're members of the public, and they get to be in the meeting too. Okay, that's all I have.
Wow, that's quick. Anybody have any questions?
What if you don't vote?
Well, you raise a good point. I don't think you have that in your code. We talked about this too. Some codes say, if you don't vote, it's deemed a yes. You don't have that.
So ours don't clarify yes or no.
So you would be an abstention. And so that's where raising the hand doesn't work. So you'd have to have a third. So your clerk would have to rapidly look to see, did everybody raise their hand, yes or no? And then if someone didn't, she would have to, Mr. Mayor, we need to find out what the position of council member so-and-so, and then he or he would be reflected as an abstention. But some codes say not voting is a yes. You don't. I disagree with that. I think you should be able not to vote and not have that be deemed a yes, but that's your call, it's not mine.
So, John, you and Tammy are writing this kind of stuff down to bring back on a future work session, and so we can clean this up.
Yes, and again, that's kind of why I raised the issue, so why don't we make use of it, and, even budget, we can do a budgeting 101, so maybe we cover these kinds of things on an annual basis at the same time of year. Usually the league has training, I think a couple council members went, maybe at that same time we do something of a condensed version just to cover some of the highlights, and I know that the clerk puts together a pretty extensive book, but I think that's part of the issue, right? It's so extensive, so if we were able to condense that down and create some real kind of cheat sheet kind of stuff, that way you would have the review of the material with the attorney, and then you'd have something that's quick, might even be referenceable at the dais and have it in front of them.
Mr. Mayor, I left out one thing. I've now met, for the first time, many of your staff who have never met face-to-face.
Right.
I am so impressed with the quality of your staff. I mean, for example, you talked with me a lot about airport issues. It is so refreshing to have Cameron here. It is Danielle on HR, it's Lance, it's unbelievable. John, Morgan, you really have a great team all pulling in the right direction. It's much better when I was here with Huey Long, and that was 20 years ago.
Right, and that's just the thing is, so we do need a refresher, and I don't know that the leagues is the right time for one. Maybe it's one that we set up as a work session, and we even bring Bill down, and he gives us his own personal crash course. We instead of him charging us, we just take him out to dinner.
There you go.
One of our Mexican restaurants.
I'll do there.
Beautiful.
Mr. Mayor, I left off Jamie just today to show you an example. She sent me an ordinance.
She just texted him.
Now you're just buttering everybody up, Bill.
No, she sent me an ordinance, and I pointed out it was a uniformity problem. And I was away, I've had some medical problems with my wife, so I was away, and I was going through, and I didn't get to, and I said, you gotta worry about this, and she already identified it 20 minutes earlier, so you've got a great team.
Awesome, great. Appreciate hearing that from an outside.
And Mayor, I agree with having a refresher course.
Absolutely.
I think that's great.
John, you'll spearhead that, and Tammy needs to be there as well.
Yeah, it'll be most of her material.
We'll get it put together.
You got it. All right, Bill, I appreciate you being
Yes, sir.
here, and look forward to you remotely as well. Bring us to the City Angel Tree, Jamie.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. This is, as everyone's been teasing me about the length of my presentations, this is a picture's worth 1,000 words. And thank you for all the volunteers and donors who made the first City of Safford Angel Tree a great success. This is a photo of some of the gifts that Pam and the volunteers wrapped, and I emailed it to you so you can see it a little better if it's not viewable on the screen. She brought over the idea from Pima. She worked with our neighbor's farm and pantry in the Safe House and kept the recipients' information confidential. Her family also helped volunteer to wrap the gifts. Joan helped create the labels and coordinate the donations. Library interns and staff helped wrap gifts. Vice Mayor Ortega put in a shift wrapping gifts.
Can I just say something?
Yes.
I think we ought to schedule it so the rest of the council can be there too.
Yes. And the police department delivered and delivered and delivered. And it was such a great success that word made it around the valley, and Sean Winham with Freeport has asked to work with us for next year. So thank you to all the staff and volunteers and council for allowing this to happen.
Perfect. Go ahead.
Jamie, I actually had a question, and this was fantastic, by the way. But I had a few, and maybe this isn't easy to answer. I don't want a cat to get out of the bag, but everybody got something,
Yes.
correct? Would it be appropriate to ask who made up the difference at the end?
We didn't have to. We had so many donations that we ended up with extra blankets and items like that that we then took to the Safe House and other things. So every item was purchased that was requested on the tree.
Okay.
So Pam and I thought, oh, there may be a few, we'll buy them at the end. We didn't have to.
Okay.
And Freeport also helped fill that gap. They had toy donations from their staff, and their other agreement fell through, and so they brought us extra items as well.
Because I know some of the public was distraught on the last couple of days to see
There was not one tag left.
and so, right. Okay, thanks.
Thanks, Jamie. Anybody else? Lance, 20th Avenue Construction Project.
Help us.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm here to be as brief as possible to update you on where we're at on 20th Avenue. I hope you're not getting as many phone calls as I am.
I get them all the time.
I hope you know where to send those phone calls. Just to kind of update you and summarize where we're at and how we got to where we're at. So this contract started on September 22nd of 2021. The total contract time of the contract was 340 days. Original completion date was scheduled for August 28th of 2022. We have had some various change orders, work stoppages, the biggest one being our cement shortage during the summer last year that was just over 2 months. In all, we had over 100 days added to the contract with stoppages or change orders or the cement shortage. Right now, the contractor has a request in for another 30-day extension to deal with phasing issues that conflicts have brought about. Before I get into that, I do want to compliment Sholo. They are doing a good job. They are doing good work, and they're dealing with lots of things. This is a complicated project. Many issues have come up that are out of their control. They handle them well. Their staff here is really good to deal with, and I did want to get that out to the public as well. Currently, they have passed their change ordered contract start or finish date of December 14th, and like I said, they've requested another 30 that almost out of already. ADOT is managing this project, so ADOT reviews their request. They're pretty tough on what they allow and don't allow, so I don't expect them to get the full 30 out of that. They also have the opportunity, and they're going to do that. They can submit claims with the consultant for errors and omissions on the plans, and we ran into some issues with these plan set not being the best plan set. They have the opportunity to go to that consultant or file a claim with that consultant to where they pay the damages that they incur on this project. So ADOT handles that as well. They kind of administer that, provide all the backup for their claims, and we'll see where that goes. But that being said, well, right now they've submitted a completion date or a project schedule that puts them to the end of March. It's probably pretty aggressive in my mind, but I'm thinking with everything goes right, we can probably be there to where we're the end of March driving on a full road. The water line is not quite all in. The storm drain is pretty much 90% in. the big part of the water line, other than the vault, has been done. So once all that's in, they still have to put in the base, treat the base with cement, put in the rest of the curb gutter sidewalk, and then do their pavement. So it's a process. Go ahead, Mike.
Lance, just a question. What about 14th? How are we doing there?
14th Avenue is same contractor. Their time frame on that, they've requested a time extension from us. We're reviewing that right now. They had some delays with materials. One was a vault up at the county pond. They were waiting on a vault to be delivered, and they also requested some time because the canal was full of water when they were trying to cross that. We're reviewing that right now. Same contractor. We're not going to give them what they're requesting by any means, but their completion date on that originally with the contract was the 21st of December for substantial. We're looking at probably giving them 45 to 60 days, which puts them, into February of a substantial completion, which means that the water line has to be able to be used. And it's wouldn't have to be a pavement and all that, but the water line would have to be used for all intents and purposes. So same contractor. They ran into a shortfall on employees, and that's nothing to do with us. I mean, they're doing their best to keep staff on hand. They did pull their pipe crew off of the 14th to put them over there to do the water line on 20th, and that's put them behind schedule on both projects now. So, like I mentioned before, if there's any questions that come up, please direct those questions. If you can't answer them, direct them to me or Gabe, and we'll answer them. But we're doing our best to keep that thing rolling along and keep plugging it. So I'm here to answer any questions you have on it.
Lance, you did, from our original budget, how many change orders have we had from there to now?
So, I don't know the total number of change orders, but in the contingency that's built into the project, we're still in good shape.
We're still under the contingency that you've allowed?
Yes, we're under contingency, and talking with ADOT, the one thing that we don't know on, and the way ADOT handles their projects, they can do an escalator based on the price of oil. So we don't know that till they go to paving again. That might, based on the price of oil, that could increase that pavement price a little bit. Talking to their PM, she still thinks that we'll still be fine within the contingency, and it should not cost us any additional funds.
You mentioned that ADOT is overseeing the project. At ADOT, were they the ones that were in charge of the engineering?
No.
That was us?
No, I think,
because you mentioned that
don't quote me on this. This is way before my time when they hired the engineer for this. This is like a 12-year-old project. I believe ADOT was part of the selection process for the design firm, which the firm that finalized the plans is not the firm that they hired. It's been through three different takeovers or buyouts or whatever. So I believe ADOT was either helpful in hiring the firm with the city. Don't quote me on that, but it was an ADOT/city project from the get-go because it was using federal funds, and ADOT was involved from the beginning. When these guys do go into liquidated damages and start paying, I think it's $1,500 a day when they go over contract time. That money doesn't come to the project. It doesn't come to the city. It basically covers administration costs for ADOT to keep managing the project beyond their time that they planned on spending on the project. So.
I noticed that we, along with some of our businesses that's along there, there's the sidewalk that's really high that's already existing right now on the north side, correct? And then we have AB that rolls up. Are we planning on going back and doing anything? Are we going back and pouring ribbons for the driveways for these businesses along there that we've impacted, or are we just saying no, they're on their own?
Anywhere that's where the plans are a little bit vague. And so I've talked to a couple businesses. Anywhere there's those ribbon curbs that are below the sidewalk, I've talked to the orthodontist. The plans don't clarify that the contractor does that, so more likely we're going to be doing that, and then they'll have to pave that ramp to a certain slope back in to tie into pavement. Anywhere there's pavement behind that sidewalk will eventually be paved back to pavement, but we're going to need to have those ribbons in place for them to pave to. So I've already talked to a couple of those businesses. Hopefully you don't run into that many issues on the other side because it's not as big a drop. It's mostly an uphill thing, but that's where we run into these errors and omissions in the plans where things weren't quite clarified, and I guarantee the contractor's not going to go above and beyond.
No, they're not.
And so, especially when they're behind schedule. So,
but we will.
We will.
Thank
we will
you.
take care of it.
Okay.
I've talked to some of them, and we'll take care of it.
Okay. Thanks, Lance.
And just one other note on the traffic signals for that project. We did go out to bid for that. We got no bidders. Our plan is, and the reason we didn't get them was what we were told is the materials are hard to come by. And so
Take Main Streets, put four-way stops on there and give it to them.
I'll second it.
ADOT has helped us out, and Maricopa County has some materials, but they won't sell directly to the city. They don't want to get in that habit, so we will be coming back to you, hopefully with an IGA between Maricopa County, ADOT, and ourselves to purchase the material so we can go out to bid and just award construction and putting up the material. So just wanted to give you an update on that as well.
Anybody else have anything for Lance?
Thank you.
Should we look into that? They may not take us serious. I know. Perfect.
And you got a basketball game to get to tomorrow, so you gotta make this quick.
Mayor, council, I'm missing one right now, so got first things first. I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you tonight. This is really an update around our previous contract agreement with the SPA and Box Canyon Solar PPA that we approved earlier this year. At that point in time when we approved it, we knew that there's going to be some amendments that were coming in November. Those have arrived, and that's what you see in your packet this evening. The SPA's resolution 2022 12-001 is a resolution that SPA, along in partnership with us, approved changes that were proposed by the Bright Knight contractor. Within those changes, we'll scroll through this. Again, Mayor and Council, we'll try and be brief, but I want to make sure that I cover exactly what occurred in this. Bright Knight brought back a proposal to SPA and its members, participating members, to give us two solar options. And within that, there's a solar option of $26.47 per megawatt hour that was solar only. And Bright Knight required an interest rate indexing mechanism to keep it at that price, at $26.47. They also brought a second option that took that indexing mechanism away and gave us a solid number at $26.92 per megawatt hour, and with that would hold that price solid and wouldn't change moving forward. Through negotiations from the 8th to 11th in those discussions, if you go to page 76 in there, I apologize. I meant to be sharing this presentation with you. So again, in our packet on page 76, it puts in comparison to the original PPA that was agreed upon earlier in the year at $21.91 per megawatt hour for solar. And then the batteries, the BESS, was $3,800 per megawatt through the month. So their proposal, they came back on October 28th, was at the additional price of $26.47 per megawatt. Again, those two proposals that I just brought forward, where the second one took the mechanism, the indexing mechanism away, and we deferred the battery portion of this contract. So per the original contract, once we were in, and the approval through SPA allowed us to move forward with that update. And so that update pushed us to the no indexing, so there is no flex in that price moving forward. Solar was deferred, or the battery for the solar was deferred, and the contract date of start would be the May 31st, 2025. Because of the deferment of the batteries, the security and reserve amounts required were all lowered. But because of the removal of the batteries from the project, a certain number of tax credits were also being removed. And so for that contract to have no financial impact because of those contracts lost. The PTC values were added, and that allowed those tax credits that weren't taken to be absorbed by the members and not by the contractor itself. So where it stands today, we go back in and we stand of the accepted proposal was option 2 with $26.92 per megawatt hour, the deferment of the battery, and with the solar coming online May 31st, 2025.
You really believe that's going to be a reality?
So, per the contract that they have in front of us at the pricing that they have, we went outside of SPA and talked to several contractors. This price number falls within the realm of contracts and projects that have been completed in the last 24 months. And so I really think that the battery portion of this contract was really where the most ambiguity was in as far as pricing and negotiation in that. And so pulling that out and deferring that battery conversation to another day allows the construction of the solar plant itself to become a much stronger project.
Who was we went and talked? Who was that? You said we.
So I brought this forward, the SPA proposal earlier in the year for the approval through the city council. And I apologize, I don't have that approval number for that resolution, but we did it here in the city council.
We'll catch up.
So that was it was just an update of where we stood with that SPA contract and where it's moving forward in those negotiations and where that project stands to date. So the current pricing that's shown there, and then online date of May 31st, 2025.
And Mayor Council.
Go ahead.
The point of the presentation is to let you know that there are parameters within the project that are changing. We've signed up for it. It helps us diversify our portfolio, as you know. I mean, at one point we were buying, gas at, 6 MMBTU, and during December it spiked at 48. So I think you're gonna see more of that volatility in commodity markets. So the more we can diversify and add solar to our portfolio, the better off we're gonna be. And of course, the technology will improve over time, so the cost itself should go down for the most part. And then also, as SPA manages our resources, which includes hydro, they'll always use the cheapest power first. So if the gas power ends up being cheaper at some point, you burn that first, then you go on. So again, by having this diversity, I think we'll find that it'll stabilize our prices a little bit.
Absolutely.
Did the council or mayor have any additional questions for me at this time?
Not on there. Anybody over here?
All right. Thank you. Mayor and council, do we need to go to the next?
I think
The
at
work
this point,
session.
we go into the work session.
Oh, we're already,
For the
that was
next
it?
presentation.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry, we're gonna close the regular meeting and reconvene into council work session. Let's bring us to item 16.1, the solar power program.
So within our work session this evening, mayor and council, was really there were some questions about our current solar program as far as the solar that's installed here in our current system. And so this program is really to bring to light what our current system does, show some comparisons to some of our competitors in the local market, and then just give some suggestions as far as how we want to move forward. So the current program within the city of Safford, we have a monthly charge of $9 to have power in the city of Safford as a base fee. There's no additional fee if you have a solar system attached to your home or your business. There's no additional fee that we charge for that. It's just your base electric fee of $9. Prices have changed significantly over the last 6 weeks, and so I'm going to refer to pricing that was completed in October of 2022. because that's when we have solid numbers as far as being able to compare across our market. Within our current program, we have a rebate rate. We have a kilowatt per rate hour if we're purchasing power of 7 cents, 7.33 cents. In our current solar program, we give a full rebate of 100% of that 7.33 cents for every kilowatt hour that's produced and put back into our system. When you sign up for our current solar program, part of that understanding is there will be no cash out and no credit transfer between different accounts that are owned by the same individual.
We don't give anybody any cash. I mean, well, I know what you mean by cash.
Yeah, there's no cash out at all. So there's no credit across enterprise systems either. So you can't take an electric rebate and charge and move it to your water bill. It stays only within the electric department. So within that, our recommended size for our solar is 125% of your normal usage over the last 12 months. The NEC, our National Electric Code, the maximum size a service can be is 120% of your service entrance bus. So if you have a 200 amp service, right, you put that 20% on top of that, you're topping out at 240. It would be your maximum that the NEC allows you to install on that entrance bus. So I wanted to throw this into a table. It's a little fuzzy up on the wall, or maybe it's just the distance from me at this point in time. But if you look in your packets on page 84, we can look at the comparisons across the city of Safford. I put in this table in comparisons to two of our large competitors in Phoenix Valley, the Salt River and APS, and looked at the fees that go there, and then also compared Sulphur Springs, which is the Wilcox Benson Sierra Vista being their namesake, and then our neighbors here in the valley with the Graham County Co-op. So with that, you can see the comparisons across their monthly charge, ours being significantly lower than some of our larger competitors, and even lower, the lowest of all of the competitors in the valley. A few of them charge additional solar fees. Within the system, you have additional work that has to be done with the solar program. You have 2 meters you're reviewing, some additional paperwork on the ground when you're reviewing that. And so some of those charges are taken in that additional solar fee in a monthly. And then you can see the rebate rates that fall anywhere between 50 and 10% of their rebate rate. City of Safford currently does 100. So that's a lot of information in one table. I tried to kind of put this into a comparison.
Jason, hold on one second.
Go ahead.
I'm going back to page 84. Councilman Lopez, correct me if I'm wrong, Town of Thatcher purchased their power now. They have their own power grid, subbed out to the co-op to take care of the power lines now, correct?
They purchase their own power, and they have the co-op do their maintenance.
I know that you were a lineman for them. Do they have a base monthly charge to bring power to a meter? Did they set that up?
They did in the beginning, and all these began early and they were mandated by federal statutes to have to accept certain solar programs that were taking place until they found out they were pricing themselves out of it, and nobody was helping with the infrastructure part of still maintaining the solar out there. And they thought they were supposed to buy back every bit that was overmade.
My question is, and Jason, you might be able to help me too as well, is I'm talking about just the monthly charge. So we charge $9 whether I use power or not. And if I have a meter connected, I pay $9. If I don't ever use power, that's what I give the city, correct?
Yes. That's not the solar, that's just
That's
for power,
just to bring
baseline
power
power.
to that meter.
Exactly.
And I just noticed that, and you probably just overlooked it, Thatcher's not on there.
So Thatcher wasn't willing to share their numbers with us, and
It's
so.
public record.
Mayor,
Go ahead.
We're in work session. Thatcher's part of SPA, so they're.
They purchase power at the same rate that we do.
They purchase power from Mesquite like we do. Now, in terms of their overhead and how they handle that, that's an internal thing, but they're part of SPA with us.
It's been a learning process the past 10 years on what took place. And
Lance, you live in Thatcher. What do you pay for a month on your standby? You were looking? Okay, good crud.
Jason,
But they did want to add charges, even if you had solar, so that they could help with the actual grid update. I mean, maintenance.
Okay.
do any of these providers do either of the other two things you mentioned, like, use the credit for another account or another, service?
No, so all of these are independent. They don't offer multiple services, so.
Oh, that's right, they don't have other, so they couldn't anyway.
Yeah.
And you're not aware of anybody else that might do that?
I'm not.
Yeah.
I know that, to me, I just feel like $9 to bring power to my service is very, very cheap.
So it's amazing. So let me go ahead and
So
throw.
I think that's where that's what I would like to change. I don't want to penalize somebody for going solar, but I think we should up that monthly charge. That's just me.
Mayor Couch, that would be part of your rate study, so when you went in to do a rate
You and my
study-
rate study.
I know you love rate studies,
God.
and you're lucky, because in order to get one, you have to hire a consultant. So
Killing me. Go ahead,
you
Jason.
get two bites at the apple, but, no, you could literally decide on distributing that overhead in terms of if you wanted a flat rate that covered more of your costs, and then your other aspects wouldn't fluctuate as much.
So if we look at what's posted, or if you want to go into your packet on page 85, I created an example that if we had a customer that used 1,000 kilowatt hours in a month, what would that bill look like in comparison to the percentage of solar generation? And so if you look at the base, just what we were looking at, Mayor, right? If we just have our base $9 and our 7 cents and 7.33 cents, and you have zero solar creation, your bill's gonna sit just over $80 a month here in the city of Safford. Sulphur Springs, your bill will sit roughly at $108. APS and the co-op will be just over 120, and SRP's is almost 152. So that's just for a base service with no solar credits whatsoever. So now if you look at the graph that's up there, the slopes that start from that beginning point to the production of power. So if you produced 100%, 120% of your bus capacity, what would your bill look like if you produce that? So we could look at 60%. So let's say we produced 600 kilowatt hours in our solar system. With that, the city of Safford's bill would just be under $40. Sulphur Springs would just be over $82. APS would be over 100. Co-ops would be over 115, and SRPs would be just over 141. So even though these programs commit that they're going to give you credit and pay you out on a monthly or an annual basis, each one is different, you actually don't have the ability to produce enough solar power to ever reach that credit limit. And so there's no limit, there's no credit ever given. If you go to the max produce that you can produce in your system at 120% of your bus capacity, you never reach a 0 point, except in the city of Safford, which if you create 1,000 kilowatt hours, you burn that 1,000, you produce your 120, you actually have an $8.15 credit at the end of the month. Any other producer, you're still sitting well above the 60, pushing clear up to $120 in that same consumption of 1,000 kilowatts for the month. So when I review this and really look at what those totals do, the city of Safford's solar program is amazing in comparison to anybody we look at as far as providing that value to our customer. Just to give a little background as far as what our solar program looks like today, you can see we have a small increase in commercial users. We have a significant increase over the last year and a half for residential. You can see the total numbers of our residentials. And again, we just wanted to throw a little bit of history in that so you could see what we're talking about as far as credits. Within the city of Safford, between October 21st and October of 21 and October of 22, the residents received $45,000 worth of credits to their account. Now again, when we signed their contract at the beginning, there's no transfer of those credits to anywhere else. And so it really just gives them a bank of electric credit that they can use within their, that current solar program itself.
And only in a year, you don't carry over?
So ours currently is in perpetuity. So that credit builds and builds. And so if you get a $10 credit for 10 years, you know, you're sitting at $1,200 without the ability to spend that because your system has been oversized. Because the solar guy that's installing it at your house wants you to maximize the size of your system, and so he pushes you to 120% of your bus size, where the city of Safford advises you to don't build it bigger than 125% of your average usage.
We're trying to sell the point that we will buy all excess generated power, and we don't.
So we do obviously use that power, but it doesn't have the ability to be transferred between, and so yeah, it builds a credit on that account. And so these both residential and solar and the commercial customers will build up these credits in their system and they can't use them. And so there's a little bit of friction that goes on when you look at your bill, and I got a bill that says I got a credit for $1,200, but I can't ever get that money out. Even though that was agreed upon when they signed the contract, it's still a little of an aggravation when you see that on a regular basis.
Jason, if somebody discontinued the solar program and had a significant amount of credit, would that remain with them as a customer?
So it remains within their cut, but it does not transfer. We will not cut a check for them at this time.
No, but if they drop their solar completely,
yeah,
they'd have
that credit is
$1,200
theirs.
worth of-
It'll continue on
Right.
in perpetuity until they use
Jason,
that.
Can you go back to that graph?
Sure.
So even looking at this, just very basic, right? The flatter that line is, the less your rebate is as a percentage of your overall bill. So you can see that in the case of the city of Safford, there's a very steep line, meaning as a percentage of your overall bill, the amount of potential rebate you get is very high relative to the other entities. And to the point where if you oversize your meter, you literally are able to accumulate credits over time, where in these other systems, you would never get there. Just generally speaking.
But how can we call that a rebate if it's, that's not a rebate?
No, it's not.
All we're showing you is the way that the system.
I know, but we're calling it a rebate. That's not a rebate.
What's not a rebate?
If they're not getting their money back, they're not getting a
It's a
rebate.
credit, not a rebate.
Yeah, well.
So I mean, we promised them
Call it a
something
credit.
we're
What to
not
call it
giving.
what it is.
Right. Well, and again, he's proposing another approach, so we can talk about that as well.
So gentlemen, after reviewing these in depth and creating this example, there's a few things I looked at, and looking at that chart, the city of Safford is far below the industry standard as far as cost per kilowatt hour. And we're far above in our rebate percentage that we credit them as far as per kilowatt hour. At that 100%, that's more than twice anybody else rebates or credits, however we want to look at that. And so I propose, after looking at this and really still wanting to provide the best product to our customer and give them the best value for what they've put in, I would suggest that we put a monthly solar fee to the solar community, to the individuals that are receiving these credits, and let them pay for those additional fees, where today it's kind of spread across all power users. And then put our rebate rate, our credit rate, whichever we'd like to call it, at a 35% or 35 cents on the dollar to their production. And if we do that, you can look here on this line, and it's the dashed orange line that I have titled Safford Proposed. So with that proposal that I put forward, we still fall well below any of our nearby competitors. I still think it provides a great value to our customers. and it allows us, the city of Safford, to continue to improve our infrastructure that supports these individuals, where right now, those costs are totally incurred by the whole instead of those solar individuals specifically.
And I just have heartburn with that in the sense of, you know, if I sit here and encourage to go green and to build, I know that if I have the opportunity to go solar, I'm gonna build it 120%, 125%, whatever I can get away with, for that reason. And then all of a sudden, because we've lost, 74%, we've lost,
We haven't lost anything, we've stolen it.
well, no, I'm saying we lost customers, by them going solar. And to me, it's like, it's almost like there's no difference between what we really wanted to go green out to the fairgrounds, and so we moved to go green out to the fairgrounds, and we pulled 200 and something homes off the grid. And so we lost that standby money from the water, when we also lost the water flow as well. And so now we're going to have to come up with something to make that difference up. And that would be once again, once we go into getting a study done, and it's going to show that, it's going to reflect that, and so we're going to have to increase something somewhere. So I understand the increase, but I just feel like, me personally, I hate to penalize my customers who chose to go green. And you guys are gonna be like, really, Jason, you're going to say that? And I am, and that is, I have an issue with the $9 monthly charge. I think that should be more. I think that should increase, and that'll do away with the solar fee as far as I'm concerned. I think that $9 is very reasonable, cheaply reasonable. I think that monthly charge could increase over your, 4,409 customers. That's gonna make up the difference right there. But that's just me. Go ahead. Or, McGoy, you don't have to ask me, you just go for it.
I just wanna, I mean, I don't know if I started this, but.
You did.
The customer who I brought to John spent $11,000 buying new air conditioners that are more efficient, is why he now is building a credit. Why can't he get that $6,000 credit he has put toward those air conditioners? Because you are selling his power, you're getting the money. How do you not owe it to him?
And we can.
That-
And again, so what we did was we did.
Well, I
the-
just want to finish
Oh,
what I'm saying. If we made an agreement with these people and now we're gonna change it, no. They're grandfathered in. You can change it on anybody later, but we're not changing it on who we made the agreements with.
Right.
Correct?
Well,
I mean, if you wanna start this going forward, because there's a lot of people jumping on this train. And I agree, it's gotta be fixed, but we don't fix it at the expense of the people who did it 15 years ago.
No, and Councilman McGoy, that's not what I'm suggesting at all. So it was brought to my attention that, just to kind of lay out our current status as far as where we're at. All of those individuals, when they signed on, and they understood the fact that even if they oversized their system, that none of that money would ever transfer back to them. That was understood when they built it. It's in the contract that they signed.
It's in the contract stated as a rebate. Go look up rebate. Go look it up. You can't find any place in there that it says a rebate just sits and floats out in there and you don't ever get it.
So at some point in the past, we created a program that in its implementation did not provide the customer with anything usable if they oversized their meter.
But they didn't. He didn't oversize. He did
Okay.
exactly what he was told. He later upgraded his air conditioners, which created this difference.
Right, so what we
He
did.
spent a lot of money to
is
get
based-
this difference,
Based
but he
on your
can't get it
request,
back.
we brought you the information.
I
Doesn't
know.
mean that we have to do this. All we're saying is that we went out, we looked at what we had, which someone put on the books some time ago. I don't know how old this thing is. At that point, question came up because people were realizing they were generating power they could not use. You're not gonna transfer the rebate credits between funds because they're enterprise funds and they're self-contained. So what we did is we brought you what the industry standards look like. If the council makes a decision, number one, to grandfather anybody in that's on the system, and then decide on some type of payback that you want to provide them with for credits accumulated, you have that option. If you want to have a different system, if your goal is to say, I would like to encourage you being green, I would like to encourage people to use solar, then the program we put in place would do exactly that, right? So all we're doing is telling you what's on the books now, what it looks like in its implementation, what the industry standard is, so that we can have this discussion. If it's council's desire to grandfather, provide cash rebates, or have some other type of program that encourages people to have solar, we can do that too.
Well, it looks really expensive to rectify, but it was I don't know how long ago this decision was made, but it came out of here.
None of the
And
bad
it's-
ones were when I was here.
Really?
Or Lou.
I mean, I just don't see how we can tell somebody
And the
that.
bottom line is that no matter what you do, the system's gonna pay for it, right? So your whole customer base will pay the bill. But if it's your desire, and this is true no matter what, as we approach any of this stuff, compensation, right? We begin with an industry standard because that tells you where most people are. It doesn't tell you where you have to be.
Which tells me we didn't start with an industry standard when we started.
That's what it appears.
Right.
And so if now as we bring this information forward and we do the analysis, if you want to go in a different direction, then that's what the point of this meeting is, and we can do that and see what we can do in terms of creating something different. If the goal of the council is to be green and to encourage that, then we create a system that does that. It's, again, it's up to you.
Well, I just have to get it in my head that this fund makes more money than any other fund we have, but yet we're gonna change it to where it makes more at the expense of the people who have done what we asked. And that's, I'm not swallowing that
Well, and I
real
want to
easy.
clarify going forward, and I won't do this artfully, but are we saying with the proposed that I could generate enough solar power to cover my entire electrical bill, but then I'll still have an electrical bill?
No, so with this proposal, so right now, we pay 100%. So 100, it's not 10 cents on the dollar or
Right.
20, we pay
Right.
100,
Mhm.
a dollar for dollar is what we give them credit for. And so with this proposal, we're saying 35 cents on the dollar. So if you follow that line and you produced 120% of your usage, you would fall right there in roughly $58 would be your bill.
So I could produce 120% of the electrical usage of my house and still have a $58 electric bill?
Yes.
Yeah, that's absurd.
Which is still better than any other program in the state.
They're all absurd then. Why would anybody get solar panels?
It's for the delta between your initial costs and what you can drop that. So, and obviously SRP is the biggest robber of the children. Sorry, Mayor. Sorry, I had to bring it up for you, right? But they get 10 cents. They get 8.3 cents on the dollar. So every dollar of electricity that they make, they are only paid for 8 cents of that dollar on it. And so, and that's why we wanted to place it up on a graph so you could see even where we stand today is significantly below our standards, below industry standards. But what we're proposing still places us well below. On a normal market value, it's still well below any of our competitors in the state.
Right, or you could put it another way and say we're above the industry standards.
You could.
Might be a more appropriate adverb. Yeah, I know we're just discussing, we can do
Yep.
whatever we want. as
Right,
Nancy
and again,
Casella
that's the
said.
whole point. I mean, did anybody know it looked like this?
No.
Whoever designed it initially, did they think this would be the outcome? Probably not, but this is what you have.
Well, what has changed? I mean, I looked at solar 20 years ago and it was not worth doing. why is it all of a sudden worth doing?
My guess is that the technology's made it more cost-effective, and the cost of.
I mean,
fossil
Safford
fuels-
discouraged it for a long time, isn't that right, Dan? You still really don't want it.
It was Dan who discouraged it. Yeah.
I mean, I understand the part about you gotta be the battery now, if, you know, and the less we sell, you know, I mean, I understand this probably has to be fixed, but I don't see fixing it on the backs of the people who jumped in early.
No, and like our city manager said, we have the ability to do whatever we want. We can grandfather in the current credits to go and continue into their account as that goes forward. We can do whatever we want as a council. And I say you guys can do whatever you want as a council, and I'll follow your direction closely, right? But there's lots of different options. We brought forward what we do today and some example of what that looks like in reality as far as a price tag and a billing. My proposal was to still provide the best, cheapest service in the state, but bring us closer to that industry standard where those costs are incurred, and allow those that are benefiting from it to pay for that benefit at a little higher rate than they do today.
I know we'll do this later again, but even if we grandfathered in or fixed the ones that are already participating, I'd like to see a number that looked a little, you can't get it perfectly zeroed out, but I'd like to see a number where it's more likely that we don't run into a lot of credits, but if I produce my full percentage of electrical, then I have a $0 electrical bill.
And so just looking at this page again on page 86 in the packet. So we have residential obviously has a higher credit rating as they usually. So you have 231 solar customers out of your 4,000 electric customers. And of those 231, over the last 12 months, they've accrued this credit. So over half of them have a credit on their account. And again, it's because of the huge rebate rate that we give them on that with dollar for dollar. So it's really, you know, every solar company that comes in isn't going to tell them, hey, you should only produce 60%. They're always going to tell them to max out what. And so if you have a 200 amp service, you size your solar to be 240, your average usage is under 50, so you're producing this massive amount above and beyond. The solar company doesn't care if you create extra power. They just know they sold you the biggest system they possibly could, and they take their commission and they roll down the road.
And again, what we told the previous customers is one thing, but going forward, we can't account for everybody who produces way more than they use. But I still think anybody that produces enough or more than they use should at least have a $0 electrical bill. That's just me, though.
Well, and there's some of them do. I mean, I didn't realize there were so many, but the one I brought forward, I mean, he specifically asked, what can I do with the $6,500? I can't spend it.
But if he's got a $300 electric bill a month, and he started new.
He's got a zero.
But again, if you
right, but if he started new with and he uses $300 worth of electric, he's going to pay $260 on the bill now, or no, I'm sorry, 35%, 70. He's going to pay.
But maybe you go forward and say, if you have an account, maybe you decide that you take whatever credits they have, and I don't know what that would look like, but maybe you give them a percentage, you cash them out at a percentage of their credits, because the credits aren't doing anything on their bill. You cash them out and you design a new program that whatever configuration that you want to encourage solar, you have options. So you can take care of the pre-existing customers, maybe clear the books by giving them some kind of cash out or percentage of cash out on the built-up credits, because it's dollar for dollar, and then come up with a different program that we use from now going forward, that whatever that looks like, that makes council happy. So let's say you're looking to increase your base on your overall bill and not focus on the solar part. You don't have an administrative fee on solar, right? And maybe you do something where they get a cash out where it's a percentage of the credits accumulated, so at least they could do something with that money, because you can't go to another fund. But all of those, whatever those decisions are, will then ultimately show up in your overall rates anyway, because it's a self-contained fund.
I totally understand what you're saying, Councilman McGoy, and the fact that if a customer had that kind of credit and went to a higher SEER on their HVAC, which changes a lot of stuff, and then the city's saying, no, you just gotta keep rolling this over, he'll never not have a credit. I mean, we're Arizona, I mean, I have to have some serious blackout days before that'll ever occur. But before you guys make this happen, let me know, because I'm definitely gonna go solar if I get 1-for-1.
Well, right now, you're getting 1-for-1, but it's a credit you can't use. And so do we want to make it a percentage and cash it out every year, and then redesign the program so they're not building up credits, or they can cash out? I mean, again, these are questions that we would have to bring you a model and you would have to decide.
I gotta say this, because I'm just that way, but it looks like we've realized that there's money sitting out there that we can't get, so now we're gonna design a system to get it. Whereas, we're making money on our electricity right now. Now, we do gotta know what this is gonna do to us later, because, I mean, if everybody goes solar, then we gotta buy power at peak, and we don't need any when the sun's out. But I just can't see us trying to figure out how, I mean, these people are, they're producing power that we're selling to someone else. We're getting the money. Why we need to get it from them, I don't know. Why we need to get it from the next customer, I don't know. If they're all providing more than they use, why do we need to get more money out of them? What is our expense? What is our projected expense? What are we trying to pay for?
Well, I think part of what you pay for is the grid that they use, which is ours.
Right.
So there is a charge for that.
That's where your base, that's where I
But
think
if
the
we
base
bring the
needs to
base
go
up
up.
and try, yeah.
Because if the base went.
But if $9 is enough for everybody else, why is that not enough for somebody who's sending power the other direction?
Well, because the base, we've gotta cover our linemen when they go out in the middle of the night from a line that's down or stuff like that.
That's
So
that
there's
same,
major-
that's that same line that everybody else is paying for at $9 a month.
Absolutely, that's why we need to increase the base, by a little bit. I mean, you know, we have, one of our providers is 1125 Graham County Co-op, which is a monthly charge. And did you guys ever find out what Thatcher had?
It's still, it says $10 base charge, but it doesn't say it's for power.
They just say something.
15%.
Right. You know, and so maybe that's just it, maybe just go up to $10 instead of, Safford has been at 9 for a long time, a very long time. I mean, we keep, when every study we have, we keep that base at $9, but we'll increase the everything else.
By golly, let's get another study going.
Yeah.
Eventually.
Studies are gonna say whatever we want it to say.
That's true.
But I'm telling you that I think a way to do this and massage it for everybody, because everybody should have to pay for the grid. It shouldn't just be me because I didn't go solar, and it shouldn't be you because you did go solar, but it should be all of us having to massage this together. And I think by the time you took 4,000 customers and you upped it to $10 instead of 9, you know, you gain 4,000, right?
That's why we pay through the nose to get a new service.
But I don't agree to penalize myself. I don't agree to penalize the Go Greeners $5 extra monthly standby fee. I understand that it's another meter, but if I'm not mistaken, aren't they smart metered? So the meters that are put in by the solar company, aren't those smart metered as well?
Yeah.
So I mean, it's as simple as grabbing that off of this. I mean, so it's not, we don't have Susie running around in the truck like she used to do.
No, there's no ground
So
labor
I
associated.
me personally, I say let's up our base salary, and I don't think we need to have a survey to do that. That'd save you 50 grand.
Well, the problem is you gotta cascade that fee throughout the system and figure out what it's meant to. right? So
This is a good discussion to have. I'm
Well,
glad you
and-
brought it to us. I mean, good crud.
Well, and again, we had a question because we have this thing popping up where people are generating rebates they can't use, so what's the point? So at this point, the question becomes, so we want an overall base increase, and again, I don't know when we can implement this, but let's go over some of these so we can kind of pull this back together. So you want a base increase overall?
Well, I don't know,
Again-
I do. I don't know if the rest
Yeah,
of us
and
do.
again, I'm just putting it out there.
But why? Are we losing money somewhere here?
So Steve, part of these funds that we collect over the years pay for the CIP projects that we have coming up. So we have our substation for our secondary substation that improves
That
our
I
system
want.
reliability, right? We know that's gonna fall well over a $10 million price tag for that. At some point in time, we have to create those funds unless we wanna go out and get a loan, and then we have a 20-year payback, and we put that in that, or we can pay for that up front in that purchase. And so that's what those funds are used for, is we put it, the electric enterprise fund has its money. It doesn't transfer anywhere else. It stays right there and is used for that. So this year, you guys approved $1.2 million of those funds to be supported, to take some of the spike out of the power cost increases for each of those customers individually. And so it's one of those things where that money is there, but you guys had the flexibility to use it as you see fit. As long as we have it out there, though, that's what the future plan for those CIP projects are.
Well, I think what Steve's saying though is we're already doing that with the $9.
Already
So-
doing what?
We already
putting the-
have an
CIPs.
enterprise, we already
We
have
have a
enterprise
bunch
funds,
of
we
money
already
going-
pay linemen, we already do all this with the $9. Why do we need 10? Why do we?
Well, and I think that we're not gonna answer this tonight, obviously.
Right.
But that's why your rates are designed and they're tiered and they have different components to them. So you have to kind of, first of all, conceptually decide what is your goal. If your goal is to encourage solar, then when we go to the consultant, then they would basically say, this is a rate structure of a community that's reflective of someone that is supportive of solar, and that cost would be embedded in the remainder of the components of your charge, which would then be translated into an overall revenue that now supports your system over time to pay not only for your capital, but for your O&M. So again, you have to decide conceptually where you want to go. And then you have to have someone help you design a rate structure that's reflective. So again, let's take the other viewpoint, and I want you to stop using so much electricity. And so I designed my rates to encourage conservation. You could do the same thing with water. So I guess what I'm saying is that ultimately, if you're going to look at your electric rates, you're gonna wanna design a rate structure, not just a solar plan, that is reflective of what you want to incentivize. And in this case, it sounds like part of that rate structure, we want to incentivize the use of solar power. That's what my takeaway is at this point.
Real quick, we're beating this poor horse to death. We lost between October 21 through October the 22nd, the city lost $45,833 by people going solar, correct?
So when you say lost,
I don't mean lost.
That's credits. It's the
Right?
value of
We
the
lost,
power.
we lost a paying customer by $45,000.
Yes, cumulatively.
And then we also lost on the commercial side, since I went at 45, I'm gonna rough this one up at 10,000. We lost 10,000. So basically, we lost, 55 grand plus or minus a little
Yes.
bit here and there by 231 people going solar and 18 going, and it looks like we've gained a little bit more and then, that's really truly not a big number.
I'm gonna sound like I'm arguing against myself, but we didn't just lose the credits, we lost the,
They still pay their $9,
right, but they're not paying for electric.
but they're not paying no electric.
So
So we
we-
lost more than 45, is that right?
We lost whatever their electric bill was.
so this goes back to the perspective that you want to talk about, right? Councilman McGoy talked about the fact that if they produce more power, we're giving them credit against their account, but we're selling that power also. And so there's no loss to the city. It's just that money isn't coming from that individual. So until we produce more power than we sell, there's not going to ever be that loss. But it just goes to, and that's why I'm trying to bring up what our industry standard is. So these larger groups and these larger selling obviously have a higher overhead than us, so I'm not saying we need to match them, but there's a reason that those costs are incurred and they keep them, because there's pole replacement. So, currently we have $1.2 million being done in just our system upgrades this year. And so if there's no money produced from that system, those upgrades can't occur. We can't replace 50-year-old poles. We can't take down a conductor that's past its useful life and is at a risk at this point, right? We can't do that because there's no money's flowing in.
I understand, we gotta get repair money for replacement money, whatever, but
If you want the solar portion of your rate structure to do something else for your customers, that can be built into it. So, I don't think we're gonna solve it tonight, so, we can bring this back, we can even bring some examples maybe of different cities and how they handle this, and maybe that would be helpful as well at a later date, and figure out if we wanna grandfather people in. But again, you really need to embed this in an overall rate study to figure out what that's gonna be and how it nets out in your system. So at least now you know how it works.
Yeah, well, I don't know that you got very much to go off of.
Not
that
yet.
work
I think
session.
we need to do more
I think
work.
that needs
I think-
another work session.
Thank you, Mayor.
I think you need one, and I think, but
I'm
at
not
least,
sure where I'm headed right now, someplace there.
but now you know what you have.
Yeah. I definitely, let's kick this around some more. I don't think we got I think we got somewhere tonight, but not really, so, I'm understanding more now.
I think that was accomplished.
Okay, perfect.
Understanding more of what's
Yeah.
happening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
John, are you okay with that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, no, I think this is a great discussion.
All right,
I mean,
Ken-
this is what you wanna do. Can I request that we, move the
This one?
budget guidance to another meeting so we can go into executive session? So-
Absolutely. Bill needs to go home.
Yeah, he's got
Well,
some.
my wife had an emergency, she's in the hospital, so I gotta get back to Phoenix tonight.
Okay,
so-
yeah, let's
So
get
why don't
moving
we-
into, let's go ahead and close our work session, and I need to make a motion to go into executive session.
You need to vote to go
Yeah.
into executive.
I need a vote.
sir.
I want us to vote that we go into executive session.
So moved.
All those in favor? All right, keep your hand up. Just take a picture of it.
You listen.
Take a picture.
Man, we are getting good.
No break, real quick until.
back on record and make sure my pastor don't hear it.
No, that's your problem. I said, what a man. The other part of your.
Vice Mayor, you wanna go ahead and hit it?
Why did you move? Did you tell me anything? You didn't tell me, bro.
Who's did? You said emergency.
Time to go, we adjourn.
Everybody
your
raise
hand and keep 'em up.
Keep 'em up.
I could have.
Arnold's a no vote, so.